When the main character of this story came to his senses in deep darkness, he immediately looked into the eyes of a huge blue dragon. He, being in the form of a small glowing clot of energy, was amazed by the sight of a majestic mythical animal and did not expect that dragons actually exist. The only thing the main character remembered was a slice of hot pizza with volcano chicken. The guy enjoyed the delicious food without thinking that it would be his last slice of pizza in his life. The next moment, the main character felt something was wrong. He was very excited and could not breathe. Unfortunately, that was the last thing I remember. In short, he just died. I remember this ghost did not understand how this was possible and thought that today, even on the news at 9 o'clock in the evening, they would not talk about something so meaningless. Looking at his new ghostly hands, the guy didn't understand what he had done wrong to die like that. The main character could not believe that this was the very afterlife. He was very disappointed and seemed about to start crying. The main characters lay down on the soft green grass, thinking that now he had no body and his mind was clouded. The spirit had the feeling that everything was in a veil. He lay next to the blue dragon and thought about his difficult fate. Suddenly, the main character heard a voice that told him to come to his senses. Opening his eyes, the guy realized that something had changed in him. The guy looked in surprise at his hand, which looked quite human. Having seen a small floating feather, the main character realized what had just happened to him. The main character came back to life, but this time he had a pair of snow-white wings behind his back. He could control them as easily as he could with his own hands, but that didn't make him any less surprised. Suddenly, the guy saw in front of him a real blue dragon who woke up from a long sleep, after which he heard a voice that said that he had a request for him. The main character looked at the mythical animal in fascination and soon realized that, in addition to everything else, she could talk to him. The next moment, the dragon brought its large clawed paw to the shocked protagonist and gently touched his chest. The dragon continued to say that the guy was the last guardian and asked him to help return the forgotten glory of the ancient god. The whole dragon himself was already very tired. After this, the mythical animal said that he had to go already, without even giving the guy a chance to think and ask questions. The main character asked the dragon to tell him everything in more detail, but suddenly a strong, gusty wind arose that almost knocked him off his feet. The reason for this was the dragon, who flapped his long wings in order to fly. Finally, he repeated again that the guy was the last guardian. Suddenly, a small butterfly appeared in the hands of the surprised guy. It was a fairy who was supposed to help him on this path. The main characters again asked the dragon to wait, but suddenly felt that his strength was leaving him, and his mind was weakening, as if it was time for sleep. After some time, the guy came to his senses and opened his eyes to see that the fairy was still in his hand. The main character realized that everything that had happened to him recently was not a dream, and that he really died and was reborn. The guy closed his eyes again to think about everything. But suddenly, he saw a message from the system that said that the fairy would guide the main character so that he would not stray from the right path. The main character realized that this was another story about reincarnation and hoped that everything would develop as a typical cliché, but everything turned out differently. The guy was chained and thrown into a cage. Having closed the iron door, the man in armor asked in a rough voice that the guy sit here quietly. The rays of the setting sun passed through the thick iron bars of the cage and fell on the main character, whose legs and arms were shackled. Having recovered a little from what happened, the main character sat down on the floor and began to think about his difficult fate. The guy was angry that he had no luck from the very beginning of his journey in the new world. The main character recalled how he had recently met two unfriendly men who, seeing that he was an angel, immediately kidnapped him. The guy was offended that he couldn't even fight back against the kidnappers because he had such a small and weak body. The unexpected fairy who did not leave the main character began to laugh because the angel had such a strange start. The guy asked her to shut up since she was not going to help him. The fairy was not at all afraid of the irritated protagonist and continued to mock him. The guy was sitting in a large Korean cell that served as a cage. The windows were boarded up. The main character believed that he owed his life to the blue dragon, so he would have to fulfill his request, but first he had to get out of here. Looking around, he saw that instead of a horse, the cart was being pulled by a monster he had never met before. The guy also assumed that there were many more slaves here besides him, since they could have been used in an escape. The protagonist's enthusiasm quickly disappeared when he remembered that, on top of everything else, he was chained by the neck. The guy had absolutely no answer to how he was going to get out of here. Then the fairy suggested that he try using his brain. To this, the main character replied that it was easy for the fairy to talk about it, but it did not solve the problem. The guy looked through the crack at the dense forests and thought that in order to do at least something, he needed to have at least some information. Now he only knew that the continent he was on was called Shirley Fleichen. Suddenly, the fairy began to say that the continent of Shirley Fleichen consisted of 7 parts, and now they were on Navy. The protagonist was very surprised by the unexpectedness. After that, he asked if the fairy knew anything about this place. To this, the fairy replied that there was nothing that she did not know and was always happy to help. Hearing this, the main character was glad that he at least had this fairy, but still regretted that instead of traveling through an unfamiliar world, he was sitting in captivity. Suddenly he remembered that he had been resurrected in a strange world and had somehow turned into a half-fledged bird. This gave the guy some thoughts. After this, the main character turned to the fairy and asked her a question. The guy asked if he had any special abilities by any chance. As an example of such abilities, the main character cited the ability to shoot lasers from his eyes. The fairy was very surprised by such an example, but still answered that the guy definitely did not have such skills. After that, she advised the protagonist to look at the interface in order to check his status. The protagonist was surprised that he had such an opportunity. The next moment, a multitude of windows and tables opened in front of the guy, in which all the information about him was indicated. The protagonist looked at the interface with surprise, which indicated the name Kim Sung-ju and the number of points opposite various characteristics. What the guy saw did not impress him. He thought that if he only had 5 points of strength and 4 points of endurance, then it was somehow weak. Unexpectedly, the fairy drew the guy's attention to the fact that he could see personal detailed information, thanks to which he learned that his height was only 147 centimeters. The next moment, the main character saw one of the characteristics that shocked him, namely, that in this world he was asexual. The fairy tried to cheer up Kim Sung-ju, who learned shocking information in his new body and said that everything was fine. She explained that angels and fairies like them didn't care about gender, but the main character quickly silenced her by squeezing her in his hands like a soft marshmallow. The main character did not understand how it was possible to forget about the floor as something unnecessary. The fairy just remained silent about this. Continuing to understand the system interface, Kim Sung-ju turned his attention to the table of his abilities. The guy was indignant that the description of the abilities was too short. For the ability Divine Dragon Protection, it only said that the guy would receive the love of the heavens. The main character doesn't understand how this could be allowed, because the description should have explained what the essence of the ability was. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. The fairy asked what Kim Sung-ju thought about these skills and said that they would be very useful for him. The guy asked what the skill Divine Dragon Defense did. The fairy explained that this skill folded and straightened the wings, and it was ideal for the small and weak body of the master because the wings added massiveness. Despite this, Kim Sung-ju believed that the skill was useless in this situation because his hands and feet were tied anyway, and he couldn't use his wings. The main character continued to study the interface, and I don't understand how it could have happened that he didn't have a single useful skill except for healing abilities. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju felt as if lightning had struck him, as if an otherworldly force was trying to point him to something important. I myself don't understand why the main character thought about the Bible. In his head, he clearly saw the image of Ronan's third Bible, which the main characters had never seen. Kim Song didn't understand what was happening to him and felt as if something was flowing into his head. The guy assumed that he had to find this Bible. After that, he remembered the words of the blue dragon who said that he had a request for him and believed that the dragon was somehow guiding him. Suddenly, the main character overheard a conversation between his kidnappers, who were nearby discussing how much they could earn by selling the angel. There were suggestions of several $billion. Kim Sun heard this language for the first time, but it seemed familiar to him. The fairy explained that it was the Navian language, and all the summoned people from all dimensions knew it automatically. Kim Seon-ju was unhappy with being called a summoned, and decided to show his displeasure by grabbing Fairy and pulling her aside. Suddenly, one of the kidnappers loudly kicked the cage and opening the iron door went inside. Roughly grabbing the main character by the hand, the man asked his friend if they could give the guy up right now if he really was an angel. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju tensed up and did not understand what awaited him next. One of the kidnappers asked if they shouldn't have tried to get more than $3 billion for selling the angel. The main character did not understand what all this meant and mentally asked the fairy to help him somehow. The fairy explained with a smile that the common currency of the Shirley Fleichen continent was dollars and hoped that the protagonist asked her about this, but this was not the case. Kim Sung-ju exhaled heavily, realizing that in this situation he could only rely on his own strength, of which he did not have much. Suddenly, the kidnapper turned to the main character and asked how much he thought the buyers would pay for it. Without losing his pride, Kim Sung-ju boldly told his captor that he was not for sale. Hearing this, the man only laughed loudly, considering the main character's words ridiculous, considering that he was his captive. The next moment, the man grabbed the protagonist tightly by the clothes and abruptly pulled him closer to himself. The kidnapper, who had an ominous aura, looked angrily at the guy and said that he did not realize his situation. After that, the man explained that they were Krinth's hunters, as indicated by the tattoo on his arm, and added that if they caught someone, that was the end. He also added that the life of the main character no longer belonged to him, and this applied to all the other slaves. After that, the man, without letting go of Kim Sung-jun, raised his hand in order to teach him a lesson and punish him for his insolence. A blow could have followed very soon, but someone suddenly stopped the kidnapper and turned to him. The bald man with a beard ordered his comrade not to touch this slave because he was worth a lot of money. The ruler stopped with regret, leaving the main character alone, who did not understand anything. After that, he came out of the cage telling the bald man that he understood everything and the slaves were more valuable than the slave traders. The bald man adjusted his monocle and began to carefully examine Kim Sung-jun as if he was assessing him. Coming closer to the main character, he thoughtfully said that the angel looked somehow strange. Grabbing the guy by the face and examining him for some time, the man continued to say that he felt sorry for selling Kim Sung-jun as a slave. Still, he smiled slyly. He said that she was a sign of respect for the main character who came across him. The man asked for a call to sell the angel at the highest price. At this, Kim Sung-ju showed his character again, and smiling sarcastically, asked what benefit this would give him. Despite her outward confidence, the main character was nervous and worried about what would happen to him next. In his mind, he turned to the fairy and asked if there was any way to escape. Suddenly, she interrupted him and asked him to wait a little. The fairy explained that it seemed to her that there was someone outside besides the slave traders. Meanwhile, people armed with sharp swords approached the cart. Kim Sung-ju didn't understand what fairy meant and asked who exactly was outside. Fairy didn't have time to explain anything because there was a loud explosion. Our heroes immediately focused all their attention on what was happening outside and began to obediently wait for what would happen next. Suddenly, another explosion was heard. Tongues of red flame almost hit the robot trader and his valuable goods. Kim Sung-jun had to cover his eyes with his hands to prevent the blast wave and the flying shrapnel from damaging his eyes. When everything calmed down, the frightened protagonist opened his eyes to see what had happened. He saw that as a result of the explosion, his cage was partially destroyed, and now it could freely escape to freedom. At this time, the man with the beard was shocked by what had happened and did not understand what was happening, so he did not pay any attention to his captive. The slave trader asked where all the guards were, but when he turned his head to the side, he stopped caring about this question. The man saw that the cage was destroyed and the valuable slave was nowhere to be found. He shouted loudly that the angel had escaped, so that the other kidnappers would go looking for him, while the main character only stuck his tongue out at his kidnapper and told him to stay in the cage. After that, Kim Sung-ju, because first he needed to escape from here. These thoughts were interrupted by a small drop of scarlet blood that unexpectedly fell on the guy's cheek. This was not surprising, because now a real fierce battle was taking place in which people were dying. One of the slave traders, seeing his opponent, asked how he dared to attack the Krinth hunters and suggested that he had completely lost his fear. He threatened the red-haired girl who stood opposite him that if she got involved with them, it would not end well for her. These roses did not frighten the girl at all. Looking at the man with red eyes, she asked how the Krinths dared to attack them. She thought that the hunters had all lost their fear, after which she swung her sharp sword to remind the man what it was. The next moment, splashes of scarlet blood flew to the sides, and the slave trader's body fell to the ground, dead. All this happened before the eyes of Kim Sung-ju, who was shocked by what he saw and, out of fear, lost his balance and fell to the ground. The main character could not believe that right now, before his eyes, some people were cutting and killing others. In this absurd situation, Kim Sung-jun came up with the idea of activating the skill, Divine Dragon Will Come With You. The main character could not take his eyes off the man who killed other people with just his left hand. The girl noticed the angel and looked at him. At that moment, the system informed the main character that he had received the love of heaven. The girl with red hair, seeing the angel, called her friend Jake to look at him. The main character was still shocked and did not know what he should expect from these people. A young guy in armor, taking the keys from a dead hunter, asked what happened. The girl replied that she had found the kidnapper's most valuable item. Jake was surprised by this because the girl had recently said that the most valuable item was Rutlian's staff. The girl continued to assure that, compared to this, the staff was simply a gift that was given upon purchase. Kim Sung-ju was very unhappy because these strangers were talking about him as if he were some kind of thing. Jake reluctantly but nevertheless came up to look at the very valuable product that the girl praised so much. The guy thought that this was some kind of nonsense again, until he saw why the girl called him. This made Jake dumbfounded on the spot. Seeing a real angel, the guy agreed with a trembling voice that the red-haired girl named Ruji was right. Jake didn't have time to look at the main character to his heart's content because one of his comrades appeared behind him and asked what he and Ruggy were doing there. Crofus, not understanding why his friends were so surprised, asked what they had found, but soon he saw what the reason for this was, which made the guys feel as if they were struck by lightning in surprise. He couldn't take his eyes off the main character, and for some time he couldn't believe that there was a real angel in front of him. Taking Kim Sung-jun's hands, Crofus apologized for the fact that his comrades found him so late. The guy respectfully continued to say that he had come all this way just to meet the angel and asked what his name was. Ruji and Jake were very surprised by their friend's behavior. Ruji realized that her comrade was too intrusive, so she quickly freed Kim Sung-jun from his excessive attention and then asked the protagonist to extend his hands. After some time, the main character was finally freed from the shackles of chains and could now take a deep breath. One of the people who attacked the slave traders asked Kim Sung-jun if his wings were real because it was the first time he had seen a creature with wings. The main character was surprised by this and then thought that it seemed like he couldn't fold his wings. After that, the guy quickly hid his wings because it was much more convenient for him that way. The people who crowded around him were surprised at how they disappeared right before their eyes. Suddenly, Jake asked if the angel didn't know what he looked like, to which he received an affirmative answer. This surprised the guy. Then he suggested that the main character look at himself in the mirror. Kim Sung-ju was shocked to see his reflection in the mirror and did not understand why his face was so awkward. Along the way, Jake asked whether the main character was accidentally called because the angel's behavior clearly indicated this. Kim Sung-ju didn't know how to answer this question and asked what it meant to be called up. These words were enough to confirm Jake's guess, because if the angel didn't know what it meant, then he really was called. After that, the guy asked if the main character had a system interface. Kim Sung-ju was surprised that strangers knew such details about him, but he still decided not to lie and honestly admitted that he really did have an interface. Then Ruji said that many different creatures were summoned from different dimensions, but she did not remember that there was even one with wings. The main character's case was the first. The girl also said that there were frequent cases when those summoned lost their memory, but the main character only thought that he was not the only one who had such a system. After this, Ruji said that the being called the Divine Dragon summoned many living beings to this world, and they were all from different cities and races. They all had a system interface, and in this world they were called summoned. The girl then suggested that if the main character didn't know anything about it yet, it meant that he only had the first level. Kim Sun confirmed this. The questions continued, and Jake asked how old the main character was, since it was difficult to determine from his face. Kim Sung-ju replied that he was 26 years old. This figure greatly surprised everyone present and left them perplexed. The main character saw this reaction, which made him feel awkward because he understood that he looked younger and everyone would definitely believe him if he said that he was 13 years old. Jake also asked when the angel got to Shirley Flacken. After thinking a little, the main character answered that he ended up here today. After that, the guy asked if the summoned had basic abilities. The main character began to hide the interface, recalling that he had the skill, Divine Dragon with me. Jake was surprised because he was the first to hear about such a skill, but Ruji was amazed that there was a Divine Dragon in the interface. Kim Sung-ju realized that he had misread the title and said that he had a skill called Healing Touch or something like that. This amazed Jake and Ruggy even more. They couldn't believe that an angel had healing skills. Kim Sung-ju doesn't understand why his friends were so surprised, because these were just healing skills that didn't have any significant meaning in such stories. After this, one of the warriors who attacked the slave traders extended his wounded hand to the angel. The guy asked the main character to heal her. Kim Sung-ju did not refuse because he himself was interested in how his skills were used. Angel suggested that he simply needed to say the name of the ability to himself for it to work. The main character looked at the fresh wound on his hand and still decided to try to heal it. Closing his eyes, the angel said the name of his skill, after which he felt how the energy from his body began to pass into the guy's wounded hand, simultaneously studying the bright light. A moment later, the wound began to heal literally before his eyes. The main character was surprised that it was easier than he thought. Ruji and Jake looked in amazement at the disappearing wound on their comrade's arm and could not believe that such a thing was really possible. Judging by the wings and healing abilities, the girl assumed that the main character was the first healer who appeared in Shirley Fleischen. This surprised Kim Sung-joon very much. He asked if there were no healers here. Jake replied that of course there weren't any, because healing someone was an incredible skill. After that, the guy added that it was a real divine talent. What he heard greatly raised Kim Sung-joon's spirits. The fairy was also pleased and said that her master distinguished himself from the other summoned ones because he was chosen by the divine dragon himself. After that, Jake said that it would be best for the main character to go with them at first. Unexpectedly, Ruji suggested that the angels join a guild called Preten. The guy asked her not to suggest it right away because this child didn't yet know what kind of place it was. Then the girl said that Jake also had some thoughts of his own on this matter. The guy justified himself by saying that he simply felt awkward about the situation, but his girlfriend did not believe him. Then Ruji asked Jake to think about it. It was pretty, because their guild was quite large and it could be good for her. It was obvious that the guy was not happy with this conversation. After that, the girl said that the devilish freaks would also become active with raids, but the angel shouldn't worry because the guild would be able to help him. Kim Sung-joo was surprised when he heard that they were talking about the devil. Ruji immediately realized that the main character was interested in this. Jake asked his girlfriend not to overdo it, because it didn't matter how useful the angel's power was, because if he himself didn't want it, then there was no need to force him to join the guild. The guy also remembered that they hadn't yet properly introduced themselves, and so he asked what the main character's name was. The angel already completely trusted his new acquaintances, and therefore did not hide his name, and said that his name was Kim Seong-ju. To this, Jake smiled and nodded his head, saying that it was nice to meet him. After this, he began to leave, suggesting to his comrades to prepare for departure. The guy ordered everyone to pack all the things they managed to get in the battle and leave. Ruji and Crofus looked at their new comrade with a smile, being very happy to meet him in this forest. Kim Sung-ju was looking forward to the adventures that lay ahead with the Preten Guild. The chariot moved slowly along the road, heading towards one of the nearest cities. The protagonist asked about his new acquaintances, whether those who were called devils were different from ordinary monsters. Ruji confirmed this and added that each of them had a special skill. That's why the hunters who were the members of the Preten Guild had no choice but to confront them. Kim Seong listened to all this but still didn't fully understand everything. Then the guy asked about the guild. The girl said that they killed the monster and suppressed military conflicts. Jake added that in the earthly language they were called detectives. The main character was surprised to hear this and asked if all those summoned were from the earth. The guy replied that this was not the case, but there were still a lot of them. Kim Seong let out a heavy sigh, realizing that he knew nothing about this world. In addition, he needed to fulfill the request of the divine dragon, but it was difficult for him to even survive. Ruji and Jake noticed that the angel was upset, and looking at each other, realized that they had told too much information at once. Ruji decided to cheer up the main character and asked him not to worry. The girl said that all the guilds were different, but there were guilds of intelligence organizations that were engaged in the search for information. Therefore, if the angels needed something, they could go to such a guild. In addition, the girl promised that if the main character stayed with them, he would soon get used to this world. Ruji also remembered that she forgot to tell that she was also called and had been living in this world for 7 years. Jake added that as soon as the summoned arrived, he needed to get an ID. For this, he had to come to the alliance of the summoned and show the interface. The guy also said that Ruji would go into an alliance with an angel. The main character was impressed by such care from his new friends. Kim Sung-ju was about to thank them for this, but something suddenly interrupted his words. The angel's stomach growled loudly from hunger because the main character had not eaten anything since he came to this world. The next moment, the carriage was filled with Ruji's loud laughter. Soon, she calmed down and promised that as soon as they arrived, they would feed the main character. After some time, our heroes arrived in the city of Shoros. Several knights in armor stood at the main gate and kept order. Adults were going about their usual business, while children were happily kicking a ball around the city streets. Ruji asked the angel if he was full and added that although the dish was a little spicy, the taste was amazing. Kim Song did not deny it. However, The main character said that it was not as good as Kukpan from Busan and suggested that the owner of the shop was Korean. Ruji did not understand at all what the angel was talking about. At this time, the ball bounced off the road and approached our heroes. It rolled right under the main character's feet, which attracted his attention. The children who owned this ball addressed the angel, calling him little sister because of his appearance. The bravest of the boys did not hesitate to ask Kim Sung-joon to pass them the ball. The main character was very unhappy and said that he was my girlfriend's boyfriend and he kicked the ball hard. Ruji laughed at this. The children thanked the angel for his help, again calling him their beautiful little sister. Kim Sun was indignant that he looked like a child, and because of this he had to listen to such things. The guy believed that he had the right to complain because his appearance had changed. The protagonist wondered for a moment if there was some special reason for this. He was also interested in what the divine dragon wanted from him, but now Kim Song couldn't think about anything sensibly, just like when he died. Without letting go of Ruji's hand, the main character walked forward and hoped that something would work out for him. Kim Sung-ju turned to the girl and asked where they were going now. Suddenly, the guy, due to being distracted, did not notice the person standing in his way and collided with him. A menacing man in a black suit and black glasses stood at the entrance to a large, magnificent building and asked if our heroes had arrived by appointment. Ruji, with a smile on her face, said that they had come on business, so she asked the man to open the door for them, but he replied that our heroes should have warned of their arrival in advance. Then the girl said that she and the man's boss were close friends. Hearing this, the security guard told his boss that he had visitors. The man who was sitting at the table and studying the documents was named Rinko. He immediately recognized Ruji and said that he was glad to see her. The girl kindly asked how her uncle was doing and added that he had gained weight. The man did not deny it. He then replied that he was doing well but was very busy due to the Shikrush raid. The man did not understand why the summoned were so obsessed with raids. The girl laughed at this and explained that it was because they didn't yet know that uncle had become stronger. Rinko also laughed and agreed with this. After that, Rinko turned his attention to the main character and asked Ruji who that lady was. Kim Sung-ju was dissatisfied that he was a guy. Ruji said that this child was truly special because he was the only healer in Shirley Flicken. Rinko was very surprised to hear this. After that, the girl with a smile on her face asked if it was good that she brought the main character here. Rinko told that he heard dryly that this time they called a civil servant. After this, the man asked his guest to follow him because he wanted to introduce Kim Sung-joon to a good person. Walking along a long corridor that was strewn with various ornaments, our heroes approached a closed door. Rinko knocked on the door and asked if the same man was inside. At this time, the protagonist was thinking about who the man wanted to introduce him to. Soon they were allowed to enter. In an expensively furnished office sat a man in a black suit whose name was Flinko. Without taking his eyes off the documents, he greeted Rinko and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The man was surprised by his old friend and asked why he was here. Flinko briefly replied that he was here on behalf of Chile. Rinko laughed good-naturedly and said that it made sense. At the same time, Flinko looked at the man with a displeased look and asked what business he had come for. Rinko explained that he had brought a child who might interest Master Chile. The man was surprised by this. After that, adjust your glasses. Flinko rudely said that interest was not such an outstanding thing, and another question was how important this child was. The man continued to say that Master Chile was not a nanny for the newly arrived summoned, and hoped that Rinko had not brought this child for nothing. These words scared the angel. At the same time, Rinko was just as friendly and asked the guest not to be afraid and to sit down. After that, he turned to Flinko and said that if he listened, he would understand how special this child was. The man hoped that the guest's special feature was not in his appearance. Kim Sun couldn't believe that they had come all this way to listen to Rinko say that even though the angels looked young, he was 26 years old. Flinko didn't believe it. Unexpectedly, Ruji turned to the main character and asked him not to worry, because they had come to meet Chile anyway. The guy was surprised by this, because he thought that they were talking to him right now. The girl replies that it was Flinko. This man was someone like a colleague of that same Master Chile. Ruji continued to explain that Flinko sometimes kept an eye on Chile, and that's why he looked so tired. The protagonist laughed at this, but the man said menacingly that he heard everything. Ruji also said that the connections of this organization were amazing because if your name was registered in Chile, you didn't have to worry about dying of hunger wherever you went. Despite this, the main character was not delighted with Flinko and therefore said that he would rather die of hunger. The girl laughed at this. After that, Kim Song suggested that in any case, This chili could be extremely useful. At this time, Ruji looked to the side and saw something that made her mood change dramatically. The main character continued to say that he was very interested to see what Chili looked like, but the guy did not notice that someone behind him was staring at him. Hearing this, the man who was hiding behind the main character began to smile slyly. After that, he turned to the angel and asked if it was him he was looking for. Kim Seong-ju, very frightened with only expectations, looked in the direction from which the unfamiliar voice came and was stunned. Everyone present in the office immediately stopped talking and looked at the mysterious man. He greeted them and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Ruji was glad to see this man and greeted him back. The man continued to stare at the frightened protagonist and talk about how he was here for the first time. After this, the man slowly walked forward to sit down on the comfortable sofa. Flinko turned to the man I called Chili and asked if he was asleep again. Kim Sung-ju couldn't believe that this unkempt man was the same Master Chili. Chili decided not to notice or direct the main character's abilities, and for this purpose let him heal his wound on his hand. Soon only a small scar remained from it. The man thought it was truly amazing. Flinko and Rinko shared their boss's delight. Chili continued to say that it was definitely a healing skill. At this time, Kim Sung-ju continued to think about how this man seemed suspicious to him. Suddenly, Chili took out a stationary knife and with a crazy smile on his face asked if the skill would work on cutout organs. Rinko turned to the angel and asked to use the interface output to show off her other skills. Flinko asked not to pressure the main character because she knew from experience that it was not particularly pleasant. Taking the knife from Chili, the man continued to say that, whatever the case, the inspection was over and advised Kim Sun to behave as quietly and inconspicuously as possible. Explained to Flinko that because of the main character's appearance and abilities, everyone will start pestering him with offers of friendship and joining some guild. After this, Chili turned to the angels and asked how many people knew about his abilities. Kim Sun replied that Ruji and her associates knew about him after hearing this. The man wrote something down in a notebook and advised that the girl should no longer tell other managers about herself. The protagonist took this advice without enthusiasm and asked why he shouldn't have talked about himself. Hearing this question, Chili began to rise from the sofa and smile slyly. Winking at the main character with one eye, the man explained that the healer now belonged to him. After this, Chili said goodbye and went to his office, asking Kim Sung-jun to stay out of the church's sight. After that, Rinko said that despite his appearance, the man always did everything according to his conscience. Ruji confirmed this, but the main character continued to be perplexed by what happened. Sometime later, everyone gathered at the table to drink tea. Ruji told them that all the guilds that were called to them killed monsters that they called monsters. These monsters were infected with devilish magic, and for killing them, the summoned received experience points. If you accumulate experience points, the level will be increased, and as the level increases, you can distribute the points and also pump up physical characteristics and learn skills. All these drawings were drawn by Ruji. Thanks to them, everything became much clearer to the main character. Kim Song asked if drawing was also a skill. The girl confirmed this but said that it was useless for killing monsters, because with increasing level, those summoned were obliged to catch special monsters. The girl also said that Master Chili was collecting orders to kill monsters and then pass them on to the summoned or mercenaries, concluding a contract with them. People like Chili were called managers or directors, and although the man looked ordinary, he was a great master in this business. Thanks to these explanations, Kim Sung-ju understood everything. Rinko, while drinking tea, was happy that his boss liked the protagonist's healing skills. Despite this, the angel was not particularly happy, because for now he was not capable of anything since he had a low level. Ruji said that as soon as the guy reaches the lower level and starts taking orders, Chili will help him a lot. The guy asked if he would be paid for the orders, to which he received an affirmative answer. The girl continued to say that by completing orders, the main character will receive experience points and he will also be paid for it. Thus, he will kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Kim Song was worried that he didn't even have money for food right now. Rinko noticed that the guy was tense and said that he would give him a place to stay right now. Kim Sung-ju was very surprised by such selfless care and didn't even know what to answer. After some time, the main character approached his apartment where he was met by a girl who said that the luggage sent by Mr. Rinko was already inside. The main character was very surprised to see the place where he would live and could not believe that he could accept all this just like that. The guy was glad that everything turned out well. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju was taken aback because he had seen something. Fairy immediately asked what happened. The main character immediately headed to the balcony because he was attracted by the stars that shone in the night sky. The guy immediately remembered the proverb that said that the constellations were jewels that angels sewed to the sky. The protagonist thought it would have been much better not to add the last sentence, but even so, he agreed that they were indeed beautiful. After this, the angel began to study the guides to Shirley Fleiken for the summon that Ruji had given him. It said that a higher level did not mean that the summoned one would automatically stop stronger, and even if the level was low, it still all depended on the skills. The book also said that in order to gain experience points, it was not necessary to hunt monsters, because first of all, it was influenced by the amount of knowledge and experience gained. In this case, the combat power will be significantly higher than that of a summoned with the same level and distributed skill points. To the main character, this increasingly resembled a computer game. In addition, there was a high probability of discovering hidden abilities if you level up with something other than hunting. The guy thought that his healing skills could be considered such abilities since they were rare. Putting the book on the table, Kim Sung-ju remembered that Ruji had told him about the same thing. Suddenly, the guy noticed the name of the author of the guidebook, who was clearly Korean. Realizing this, the main character felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He remembered that his new friends had said that races from numerous dimensions were gathering in this world. Kim Sung-jun felt that the interface of this system was exactly like the interface of an earthly RPG game. Then the main character suggested that the divine dragon who created this system also came from Earth. Unfortunately, the guy could not confirm his guess even if someone was asked about it. Still, the main character decided that it couldn't be like that, and so he stopped thinking about it and went to bed. The next morning arrived. The rays of the early sun illuminated the fortress walls and towers that protected the city. The main character suddenly opened his eyes because he heard some strange noise that was spreading through his room. The sounds did not subside, which greatly frightened Kim Sung-jun, who did not expect such an awakening. Having risen, the guy began to look around, not understanding what these sounds were and where they were coming from. Finally, the main character looked in the right direction and saw that there was a huge bird standing outside the window. This frightened Kim Sung-jun even more, but the pelican continued to knock on the glass. Still, the frightened protagonist realized that the bird wanted him to open the window for her and asked her to wait a little and not knock anymore. As soon as the window was opened, the bird immediately opened its beak and spat something right into the guy's face. It was a sheet of paper folded several times. The main character assumed that it was a letter for him. Kim Sung-ju didn't understand why there was such a strange means of communication here. The letter stated that the boy needed to complete a task to get rid of the rat monsters. For clarification, the main character turned to Rinko, who asked if the guy liked his first job. Kim Sun replied that anything would suit him, since he had even worked as a courier and a waiter. Hearing this, the man thought about something. It seemed that he had some thoughts about additional work for the main character. Looking through the documents, Rinko said that regarding the delivery, there was an order for the transportation of royal hostages. This greatly surprised Kim Sung-jun. The guy asked if there was anything like delivering regular food. Rinko replied that such work was for regular people and not for conscripts. Still, the man decided that the task of getting rid of the rat monsters was not bad for the first time, and believed that since the main character worked in a restaurant, he would be able to catch rats. He saw the image of what Kim Sung-jun needed to catch. The guy's enthusiasm disappeared, and he thought, how could it be called a rat? Still, he decided to try to complete this task, because now hunting was the most effective way to increase his level. The fairy, who had been sleeping all this time, suddenly woke up from some sounds in the room. She saw that the main character was getting ready to go somewhere, and asked in surprise if the guy had really woken up so early. Continuing to get ready, Kim Sung-ju replied that he had one task that needed to be started immediately. The fairy, who had not fully woken up, did not understand what was happening, and asked where the main character was going to go. Kim Sung-ju zipped up his jacket, indicating that he was ready to go on a mission. Still, the main character answered with a smile on his face that he went to the bakery to catch the rat monsters. Remembering the appearance of his opponents, the guy thought that they were not so scary, because rats remained rats in another world. After some time, the main character came to a bakery where he had to complete a task to eliminate the rat monsters. The shop owner carefully studied the document and asked if the guy was really the one who had received this order. The man doubted and asked if Kim Sung-ju was too young for this. The guy replied that he was already an adult, but the baker found it hard to believe. Still, The man said that he no longer wanted to cooperate with the guild because they send him small children. After that, he offered the main character to simply work in his shop. The man explained that even the mere presence of Kim Sung-joon in his shop would greatly increase sales. The main character understood everything, but this type of work did not suit him at all, so he refused to work in the baker's shop. Then the man thought that the guy could work better together, after which he told the main character to catch the mice and leave. Pointing to the door to the basement, the baker said that he was bothered by monster rats that had licked out of the pantry, so the guy needed to go and deal with it. After that, the man looked at Kim Sung-joon with skepticism again. The guy didn't understand what was wrong this time. The baker asked if the main character had come to complete the tasks empty-handed. The guy was surprised by this question because he didn't know that he needed to bring something with him. Hearing this, the man said that the guy looked like a typical conscript who considered himself a superhero. After which, he asked the main character to wait until he brought something that would be useful to him. After some time, Kim Sung-joo, holding the mop that the baker handed to him, carefully descended into the dark basement. Seeing another door, the guy doubted whether he should go there because it was dark here and he could hardly see anything. Then the fairy began to insist that Kim Seon-ju try to use the blessing of light. The guy was very surprised by this advice. He thought this was not a very good idea, because then he would only be able to raise his strength by 1 point. But the fairy replied that her intuition told her to do just that. In order to speed up the decision-making process, the fairy suddenly began to tug at the main character's jacket, asking him to do exactly as she said. Kim Sung-ju remembered that he tried to do something similar last night, but all he managed to do was increase his strength and agility by 1 point. Still, the main character agreed to do as the fairy advised, because it was better than nothing. And for this, he put his hand forward. The guy remembered that if you don't specify a target, the skill will automatically apply to him. After that, the guy's hand began to emit a bright light. Soon a bright flash filled the entire basement, driving away the darkness. After this, the main character had to system notification that his strength and dexterity increased by 1 point. This surprised the guy very much. The fairy explained that it was the effect of the ability, after which she asked if the guy had really used it. "I don't know what will happen." Kim Sun replied that he expected the light to come straight out of his chest. After a bright flash of light, the protagonist's eyesight in the dark became even worse, and he could hardly see the interface panel. Still, he read the message which said that the guy had a new skill which allowed him to see in the dark. This made the main character happy. He immediately used it. The guy didn't understand how he managed to get a new skill, but he was pleased that he could now see much better in the dark. In addition, it was a passive ability. Kim Sung-ju continued to walk forward, thinking that the skills appeared very easily. Suddenly, something passed in front of him at a tremendous speed. The main character immediately looked to the side, feeling the approach of some kind of danger. The next moment, a frightened Kim Sung-ju held out a mop in front of himself, thereby defending himself from his opponent's attack. It was a rat monster that looked at the guy with red eyes full of rage. The main character was scared and did not understand why it was so big. Having come to her senses a little, Kim Sung-ju decided to attack her opponent in response, and for this, she swung her leg. The next moment, the guy hit the rat monster with all his might. The guy himself didn't expect this from himself. The rat flew back from the main character's powerful attack and crashed into the stone wall of the basement. The guy was still scared from the surprise, and trying to come to his senses, he thought that he almost got into deep trouble. The angel looked at the defeated enemy, not believing that he had managed to do this, and thought that if he had done just a little bit more, he could have been seriously hurt. Kim Sung-ju understood that if the rat attacked him again, he would not have enough strength to stop it, so he had to come up with something. Unexpectedly, the fairy said that the main character turned out to be much stronger than he thought of himself. Hearing this, the guy grabbed his assistant and told him to help and not just watch. The fairy began to speak with difficulty that now was not the time for arguments. The children were still enemies. The main character raised his head up and saw several pairs of bloodthirsty red eyes looking at him. The next moment, the rat monsters simultaneously rushed towards the frightened Kim Sung-joon. At the same time, the system reported that the effect of the blessing of light had disappeared. Meanwhile, the enemies were getting closer and closer and intended to cripple the guy. The main character didn't know what to do, and in desperation, he put his hand forward and used the skill of blessing of light again. A bright flash of light immediately hit the rat monsters, blinding their red eyes. Meanwhile, a loud noise was heard in the baker's shop, which frightened the man and his customer due to its suddenness. The woman immediately asked what that strange sound was. The man nervously tried to justify himself by saying that the warehouse was currently being cleaned. Looking towards the basement, the baker got angry and wondered what the main character was doing there so loudly. Meanwhile, an exhausted Kim Sung-ju leaned his hands on a mop and tried to catch his breath and come to his senses after what had happened. The guy stood on a mountain of defeated opponents and was sincerely glad that he managed to survive and win this battle. Kim Sung-ju thought that if he had known from the very beginning that rats were afraid of bright light, he would not have suffered so much. The fairy responded to this by saying that this is precisely why she immediately asked the protagonist to use the skill of blessing light. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju looked at Faye with anger from what he had experienced. After this, the main character asked why the fairy didn't tell about this earlier, since she knew everything. At this point, the fairy just remained silent because she understood that it was useless to explain anything. Then the guy opened the system interface and looked at his characteristics, because he received a notification that his level had been increased, and he had received 1 skill point as a reward. The main character began to be indignant that he had suffered so much, and even increased his level, but he was given only 1 stat. He considered that it was too petty. To this, the fairy said that if the guy gradually accumulates them, then this will greatly help him in the future, and perhaps he will become the only healer on the continent. After that, the fairy advised the main character to invest this point in sacred power, because the higher it was, the better. But Kim Sun chose to improve his physical strength, which shocked the fairy. She began to explain that it was necessary to increase divine power, and asked what the guy would do if he needed to use healing, but did not have enough divine power. At this, the main character smiled and said that the fairy apparently did not fully understand everything yet. After that, Kim Sung-ju threw the mop off his shoulder and with a sharp swing placed it on the floor. The guy continued to confidently say that since ancient times, the best healer was the one who destroyed the danger before his comrades had time to suffer. The fairy was shocked by what she saw and the guy's thoughts and thought that in many ways he was very strange. However, she admitted that in the future, Kim Sung-ju could become a really cool healer. From this praise, the guy became embarrassed and began to smile. During one of the cut conversations, the main character asked the fairy what her name was. The fairy replied that she didn't have one and asked the guy to give her some cool name. Kim Sung-ju thought about it, but suddenly he saw bags with the inscription hot chocolate mix and suggested that fairy be called that. The fairy didn't understand what it meant, but it sounded like something hot and sweet. Still, she agreed that she was a hot and sweet fairy and therefore the name hot chocolate suited her. As a result, our heroes decided that now the fairy will call hot chocolate. After some time, the main character came to the alliance of the summoned again. The guild members were not yet accustomed to the new worker and constantly looked at him, surprised at how beautiful this child was. A familiar voice addressed Kim Sung-jun, which caught his attention. The guy turned to see who was talking to him. It was Ruji, who was running towards the main character and cheerfully waving her hand in greeting. Kim Sung-ju felt as if some kind of danger was approaching him, which made him momentarily dumbfounded. The next moment, the girl pounced on the main character and began to hug him tightly, saying that she missed him very much. Kim Sung-jun didn't like it very much, so he started telling Ruji that he shouldn't hug a guy he barely knew. The girl didn't pay attention to it. She was glad that the main character was doing well with the guild's tasks, so she asked what level he had already reached. The guy answered with regret in his voice that he had only reached level 5. Suddenly, Ruji got angry because she had already told the main character not to tell other people his level. The girl was surprised that the guy's pumping process was going pretty fast. Kim Sung-ju told me that every night he sheathed the toys because no one wanted to touch the moving killer toys. In just 1 week, the main character completed 12 small assignments. He came to the eyes of the cursed toys, the rabbits. He also worked as a porter in the mountains and hot desert, carrying heavy loads from place to place. One of the jobs was to build a barrier in an area that was teeming with monsters, since low-level summons were not fit for hunting, so they had to do this kind of work. The main character was very tired of all this and therefore believed that it was difficult to make a living. Ruji laughed at this and advised the guy not to accept such strange orders anymore. The girl also asked Kim Sung-jun to be careful because she and her friends would be gone for some time. The guy asked where they were going. Ruji said that they were going on a Shikrush expedition. It was usually called a raid. About 100 people would go to defeat a low-level devil. In fact, it was very few, but they were all elite summons and diamond-level hunters, and there would even be an archmage present. Ruji was looking forward to this passage with admiration, because there would be famous adventurers from this area. The protagonist was also interested in this and asked where they were going. The girl replied that they were going to the Liukpin Valley, which was not far from here. Suddenly, some guy appeared behind the girl and did not address her. The guy asked if the girl's name was Ruji. She looked back in surprise, not understanding who was addressing her. Suddenly, she saw a young guy with flashy tattoos in front of her. It was a man who was called a collector. He was a devil hunter. The guy tactlessly placed his hand on the girl's shoulder and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and added that Ruji was prettier. The girl immediately pushed the collector away from you with displeasure and told him to go where he was going. The guy said he just wanted to be friendly, but Ruji didn't want to be friends with him. Then the collector, smiling slyly, asked if he should have told Jake about this and added that with their skills, they should not have even dreamed of such a trip. Suddenly, the guy noticed the main character who had been standing nearby silently all this time and asked with surprise who this girl was. The collector suggested that perhaps it was because the beauty everyone was talking about. Ruji became indignant that the guy was going to pester the children as well. The collector continued to say that according to rumors, this girl was probably beautiful, after which what was the name of the main character. Ruji asked Kim Sun to just ignore the guy, but he continued to say that he was a devil hunter. The girl herself considered him just a crazy scoundrel. Hearing this, the collector was stunned by who they really thought he was. After that, the main character addressed the guy kindly, but at the same time, an ominous aura emanated from her, which surprised the collector and Ruji. Kim Sung-ju asked if the guy knew who he was, after which he began to rudely say that the collector was behaving like a scoundrel and trying to show off. The collector had strong connections. All he had was that he abused them and attacked the weak. But now that has come to an end. Someone higher in rank appeared, so the guy had no choice but to crawl helplessly and apologize. The collector was frightened and did not understand why the girl in front of him spoke so confidently, as if there was an influential family behind her. The guy thought about the fact that the girl looked like she had never seen life before, but at the same time she had a sharp character, so he assumed that she was some kind of noblewoman. The collector was afraid that this was so he decided that he would have to apologize, after which, very worried, he respectfully bowed to the main character. Then Kim Sun asked who the guy's boss was. The collector timidly replied that he worked for Mr. Corpin. The protagonist felt that he needed to meet him. Hearing this, the collector immediately fell to the floor and asked the main character to have mercy on him, because if his boss finds out everything, it will be the end for him. The people present in the guild were shocked by what was happening. Ruji turned to the protagonist and suggested that this was enough and it was worth stopping torturing the collector. Kim Sung-ju thought that the girl was right and ordered the guy to get up from the floor. The collector immediately obeyed. After this, the main character asked him to stay away from Ruji and asked if the guy understood what would happen if this happened again. The collector timidly replied that he understood everything. Then Kim Sung-ju ordered the guy to leave immediately, which he immediately did by running away. The main character was glad that the scoundrel had finally left. Ruji was surprised by what Kim Seon-ju had just done and assumed that he was the son of some noble family, but the boy began to deny it. Then the girl asked why the collector behaved like that. The main character did not have an answer to this question. After that, Ruji thanked the main character for his help. Suddenly the girl noticed the time. It was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which meant that it was time for her to set out. Ruji quickly ran off to do her business, saying goodbye to the main character and saying that they would see each other soon. Left completely alone again, Kim Sung-ju let out a heavy sigh of regret. The fairy noticed this and asked what happened, assuming that the main character was upset because of a fight with that guy. The main character responded with displeasure that he had heard that the devils were very strong and did not understand why he was so weak and thought that it was unfair. The guy also didn't want to do small errands again, but instead wanted to go on a campaign against the devil. Suddenly, a guild worker approached the main character and asked if he was Mr. Kim Sung-jun. The girl handed the guy the documents and said that rhinoceros carp had appeared in Lake Trencha, which the main character had to catch. Kim Seong-ju was upset when he heard this, because he thought that fishing was just another small errand. Suddenly, the girl said that for each fish caught, they gave $100. Hearing this, the guy's enthusiasm increased noticeably, and he decided to immediately go to the lake right then. After some time, the main character arrived at the right place and looks at the price tag and sees how much money was indicated on it. The shop worker who sold the necessary fishing equipment asked if the guy was really going to fight with that price tag. Kim Sung-ju couldn't believe that the fishing rods were so expensive. At this point, the man asked if the main character had never heard that games required equipment. The merchant continued to say that in our time, fishing was also one of the types of entertainment, So if a guy was going to catch rhinoceros carp, he should buy something stronger and more expensive. Kim Sung-ju looked at the man with displeasure, holding the most expensive and the cheapest fishing rod in his hands, trying to make a choice. Still, the main character decided that he would take the cheapest fishing rod. The merchant laughed at this and offered to show him how to use it. The man said that for fishing, you had to use a float, and you had to cast the rod carefully because if you did something wrong, you could hit yourself on the head. While the merchant was telling all this, Kim Seong-ju noticed a straw hat that was lying on the shelf behind him. The guy also asked how much it cost. The man replied that she didn't sell it because some old man left it. Despite this, the main character decided that she would now belong to him and asked the merchant to dust her off. Soon the boy went fishing. The man wished him good luck and asked him to be careful so as not to drown. Wearing a straw hat on his head, Kim Sung-ju enthusiastically went fishing, anticipating spending his time very usefully. The main character was sailing in a boat on Lake Trencha and was surprised that it was so big that it once covered even the Lukban Valley. Fetch also added that in ancient times this lake extended beyond the horizon, and one could even confuse it with the sea. Kim Seong-ju could not believe it. Then Hot Chocolate said that once upon a time there was a great war, and its instigators were someone named Lukban. That's where the name of the lake came from. It was a war with the devil, so the landscape was greatly changed. Fortunately, this devil was sealed, but the Allied forces suffered heavy losses, and even now their traces remain in the valley. The fairy continued to say that in fact it was so long ago that there were no records left of this event. Then the fairy assumed that it was natural that no one remembered this. The protagonist was surprised that these devils were more terrible than he had previously thought. The guy also regretted that it was difficult for him to deal even with the mice. The fairy replied that it was not so difficult anyway, because now no one worshipped devils. The protagonist was surprised that they had been worshipped before. The fairy explained that the devil's power lay in the believers and their sacrifices, but soon people realized that these creatures had to be destroyed. Fairy also added that Kim Sung-ju could also have gained power in a similar way. The main character was very surprised by this, not believing that people could also worship him. Hot Chocolate replied that it was possible because the guy was an angel, and goodies could be accepted as offerings. Suddenly, the man who was steering the boat turned to our heroes and told them to prepare for landing because they would arrive soon. The main character looked around and saw the endless expanses of a huge lake where people were already fishing. On the shore, elderly men were playing board games. This was Lake Trencha, which served as a place of rest for all sorts of literate people. The main character was surprised that such a huge lake was once even bigger. The man who was steering the boat said that before there was such a peaceful landscape here even in the evening. But now, when it began to get dark, the crucian carp rhinoceroses woke up and made noise. As soon as the sun rose, the fish hid deep under the water again. The main character realized that she woke up in the evening. After that, Kim Sun looked at the water but saw nothing there. The man asked the guy to be careful and also said that they had already arrived, so he had to take his things. Soon, the small boat sailed up to a small wooden pier and stopped, giving the passenger the opportunity to step safely onto the shore. Kim Seon-ju easily crossed over to the pier and went to study what was happening on the shore. There were quite a lot of people here who were talking to each other, but they immediately noticed the appearance of the main character. They couldn't take their eyes off Kim Sung-jun and didn't understand why such a small child came here. The guy was asked if he had really lost his parents, but the main character didn't say anything because he was already tired of explaining everything to everyone. Suddenly, Kim Sung-jun's path was blocked by a girl who was there to go fishing. The guy didn't want to talk to strangers, so he answered the question without enthusiasm and began to wait for what the girl would say to him about it. Hearing this, the stranger assumed that her interlocutor was a summoned one who had come to catch crucian carp rhinoceros. The girl then said that if this was really the case, then it would have been better for the main character to return home. Kim Sun asked why he had to do exactly that. The stranger explained that real hunters had gathered here, who came here because they were given a lot of money for the fish they caught. But these crucian carp were too agile and strong, so no one here had yet managed to catch them. The girl believed that most of the hunters would leave here within a couple of days because they would not be able to achieve anything. Kim Seong-ju looked around and saw that indeed no one had the catch they needed, and some people were already getting ready to leave. After this, the girl noticed the fishing rod that the main character came with and could not believe that he was going to catch fish using it. The guy proudly replied that a true master of his craft didn't care what he worked with, even if it was a cheap fishing rod whose strength was the worst. The stranger laughed at this, saying that the guy didn't look like a master at all, after which she wished him luck and went about her business. After this, the fairy turned to the main character and asked him what he was going to do. The guy thought for a while and then said that the crucian carp only appeared in the evening. Therefore, they will have to wait until that time, and in the meantime, they can rest. After some time, the fairy turned to Kim Sung-joon, who was sleeping, and asked him to wake up. The main character opened his eyes and was shocked to see hot chocolate right in front of him. The guy immediately screamed out of surprise and threw the fairy aside. Still frightened, Kim Sung-joo began to get indignant and asked fairy never to do that again. The main character quickly came to his senses and calmed down when he learned from the fairy that all the hunters had already gone on a night fishing trip. The guy immediately asked where exactly they all went. Hot chocolate replied that the hunters sailed to the middle of the lake. Kim Seong-ju was very surprised by this and did not understand how he could get to the middle of the lake since he did not have a boat. Then the fairy asked the guy if he wanted to try using his wings. The main character seriously thought about fishing while hovering in the air. The fairy said that if the angel spreads his wings, he will reduce the weight of his body and will be able to calmly walk on the water without going under it. The guy was very surprised by this. Initially, the main character did not believe that this was possible, but still he had no other way to get to the middle of the lake. Kim Sung-ju took off his shoes and prepared to spread his wings, saying that if he drowns, it will be the fairy's fault. The main character had already prepared his wings, but for some time he stood on the shore, afraid to go into the water. Still, the angel plucked up his courage and took the first step, barely touching the surface of the cold water. The guy still doubted and asked the fairy if he would definitely not drown. Hot chocolate replied that Kim Sung-joon shouldn't worry because he was an angel. At this time, the guy took a few more steps forward, which were already much more confident. Soon, the main character got used to the fact that he could walk on water with the help of his wings and began to feel more confident. Continuing to move forward, the fairy drew her master's attention to the hunters who were nearby. One of the hunters desperately tried to pull the rhinoceros carp out of the water, but the forces were unequal, and in the end, the fish managed to escape from the man. Then his friend suggested using lightning magic to stun the fish, but the guy in glasses said that it wouldn't work because the fish had resistance to magic. Suddenly, somewhere in the darkness of the night, the cry of hunters was heard, who reported that their boat was going to the bottom. Kim Sun immediately paid attention to this and asked the fairy what had happened there. The fairy had no time for this. She told the guy that their prey was right under his feet. At that moment, a notification came in which reported that the size of the rhinoceros carp ranged from 50 centimeters to 1 meter. The peculiarity of this fish was a horn on its head, hard as steel, and also an extremely vicious character. Rhinoceros crucians were very cruel. The message also said that the fish rammed everything that came into their sight with its horn. Soon, Kim Sung-ju felt what it was like for himself. The main character quickly flew back, but the fairy warned that if the guy continued to move away, the fishing rod would not reach him, so he needed to stay on the surface a little longer and cast the fishing rod. Hearing this, the guy became angry because the crucian carp almost bit off his leg. After this, the main character assumed that the fairy simply wanted to watch him die. Hot Chocolate denied this and then warned that if Kim Seon-ju continued to hesitate, even more dangerous fish would gather. Seeing that the number of crucian carp rhinoceroses had increased many times, the main character was dumbfounded and could not utter a word. The fairy turned to the guy in order to get at least some kind of answer. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju smiled kindly and said that he and fairy were doomed and suggested that they surrender. Hot Chocolate, who didn't understand anything, just silently looked at the main character, not believing what he had just heard. The fairy turned to the main character and said that he decided to give up too quickly. The guy replied that he did not know what to do, and it was better to go back and have a drink. The fairy continued to convince Kim Sun, saying that he had already gone too far, but the guy insisted on his own and said that no one would die because he did not catch this fish. At this time, other hunters were desperately trying to catch the rhinoceros carp, despite all their unsuccessful attempts, and decided to move in the other direction. Flying over the hunters, Kim Seong-ju laughed and told the fairy that they weren't doing very well there either, so this work was impossible and useless. Seeing this, Hot Chocolate assumed that everything was heading towards a collision between the boat and a huge fish, and suggested that it would be nice if the hunters had a healer. The protagonist agreed with this, but was not going to do anything, and thought that the men should at least drink some kind of potion. The fairy continued to convince the guy not to give up, and at that moment, the rhinoceros carp attacked one of the boats and turned it over. The people who were in it began to scream loudly. This noise attracted the attention of the main character, so he immediately looked down trying to understand what happened there. Other hunters also heard the screams of their colleagues and looked away, not understanding what had happened. It turned out that one of the hunters, as a result of the attack of the crucian carp, fell out of the boat and was now floundering in the water trying not to drown. He loudly asked people to save him. The man who was nearby started shouting for the hunter who was in the water to get out of it faster, because it was dangerous. The next moment he saw that the man's boat was overturned and therefore he urgently needed help. The hunter immediately turned to his comrades and ordered them to quickly drag that guy into their boat. Kim Sung-ju watched all this from the side and was very worried about what was happening below. The guy became even more nervous when he heard a bunch of carp approaching. Several dozen aggressive fish gathered into a whole school and rushed at great speed towards the guy who was floundering in the water. The angry fairy turned to the main character and said that he definitely had to help this man. Kim Sung-ju couldn't think of anything better. He grabbed a stone in his hand and swung it hard to throw it at the rhinoceros carp. The next moment, the stone flew down at great speed and, hitting the water surface, caused a huge explosion that killed the aggressive fish. The hunters who witnessed this were shocked and did not understand what had happened. Hot Chocolate was also surprised by the protagonist's abilities and looked at him with admiration. At the same time, Kim Seon-ju himself did not expect this from you, and only looked down with wide eyes, assessing the consequences of her actions. The guy quickly came to his senses as soon as he felt a sharp pain in his arm, because throwing the stone made it tense too much. The hunters did not understand what had just fallen from the sky, but anyway, all the carp were unconscious, which the fishermen decided to take advantage of. The fairy began to say that everything was fine, and all the people remained safe thanks to the main character, and it was wonderful. The guy himself was not particularly happy about this and was healing his injured arm. Kim Sung-ju said that he was going to help people, but he gave in to some impulse. You could say that his body itself reacted first. This conversation continued for some time, while someone's bright red glowing eyes looked at our heroes from the bottom of the lake. The fairy suggested that the main character was somehow unwell at heart. The guy confirmed this. Suddenly, the conversation was interrupted because something started to happen downstairs. The hunters watched in amazement as a large wave of water rose up in the middle of the lake for no apparent reason. The main character also paid attention to this, not understanding what was happening there again, and began to look down carefully. Kim Seon-ju saw that the surface of the water was somehow strange and did not understand the reason for this. The next moment, a huge column of water rose high into the air and caused large waves that swept away the hunters' small wooden boats. The surprised protagonist continued to watch what was happening without taking his eyes off, despite the fact that the fairy warned him that it was dangerous. Very soon, the water began to flow down and the bistro returned to the lake, showing the reason why such a strange and unexpected phenomenon occurred. Seeing a huge monster standing in the middle of the lake, the frightened hunters began to shout loudly that it was a great devil. The main character did not understand why the great devil appeared so unexpectedly in such a place. At this time, the devil, breathing in the fresh air, smiled widely, as if he was very happy to be on the surface of the water. After that, he turned his attention to Kim Sung-jun, who was flying nearby. The devil began to say that the main characters woke him up, and calling him his brother, thanked the guy for this. Surprised, Kim Sun replied that he did nothing like that. Then the great devil clarified that it was not the main character himself who awakened him, but his divine power, with the help of which the guy threw the stone into the water. The devil was very surprised because he was sleeping peacefully, and then suddenly this started. After this, the great devil laughed good-naturedly. It seemed that he had no intention of harming anyone. After this, the fairy turned to the main character and quietly asked if he wanted to run away, because if the devil attacked, he would turn the guy into powder. Kim Sung-ju replied that the devil could be chasing them, so they had to be careful. Suddenly, huge monsters approached the guy, and he was surprised. The devil asked the frightened Kim Sung-jun if he was an angel, and added that he had not seen them for a long time. Then the main character asked if the devil wanted to beat him. The monster was surprised by this question and asked why he had to do that. After that, the devil smiled good-naturedly and said that he had many topics for conversation with his new brother. Then the guy simply asked to give him some direction. After some time, the great devil told Kim Sung-jun everything. It turned out that he simply came here to look for a friend but got lost and fell asleep. The devil continued saying that Lake Sejinian was so big that it was easy to get lost there. The main character was surprised because he didn't know what kind of name it was. The fairy explained that this was the old name of Lake Trencha, and suggested that the great devil had slept here for a very long time. Then the guy asked how long he could sleep here, to which he received the answer of at least 5,000 years. This figure shocked the main character. Suddenly the great devil turned to the angel and asked what his name was, because since he had helped him, he did not want to forget him. The guy, without hiding his name, honestly answered that his name was Kim Sung-ju. The great devil was surprised and said that such a banal and unpleasant name was at odds with the angel's beautiful appearance. The guy replied that it was his grandfather who chose it for him. The devil continued to say that the longer he continued to look at the main character, the more he reminded him of someone. The devil remembered a beautiful girl with long blonde hair and said that he missed her very much. The main character replied that he did not know who he reminded his interlocutor of, but he was a man. The devil, hearing this, immediately apologized. After that, Kim Sung-ju asked what the great devil's name was. He replied that the guy could have called him Trikal Pel Rosnia Tinas Felikian. The main character was very surprised when he heard this and thought that the great devil had just come up with this name to make fun of the guy. Kim Seong-ju also noticed that even when the devil saw people, he simply smiled, which indicated that he was not dangerous. Trakel continued to laugh and say that he did not understand why he fell asleep, because there was not even a hibernation season then. The main character also could not answer this question. After this, the boy turned to the great devil and asked him for forgiveness for waking him from sleep. He then said that most likely Trikala's friend had already died because too much time had passed. The devil began to deny this, saying that they did not simply disappear. Hearing this, the main character suggested that perhaps Trikala's friend was also a great devil, after which he wished his new acquaintance good luck in his search. The guy was about to leave, but suddenly the devil said that he had an idea and asked if the main character could help him find his friend. Trickle continued to say that he was quite famous, so it wouldn't take much time. After that, the devil said that his friend's name was Shikrush. The main character was dumbfounded when he heard this. Kim Seong-ju knew this great devil and therefore immediately, very worried about something, asked Trikal if his friend was very strong. Smiling widely, the great devil confirmed this, saying that Shikrush was so strong that it could not be described in words, but he was still stronger than his friend. Having taken good aim, the archer released the bowstring, after which the arrow flew at great speed towards its target. The wounded Ruji, very nervous, again put the arrow into the bow and pulled the bowstring, preparing to make her next shot. The conscripts and mercenaries gathered in a large square to hear their commander's instructions before carrying out the mission. Ruji was also there. She was very pleased that she would be able to take part in such an event and therefore listened attentively to the report that the goal of today's campaign was Shikrush. The commander continued to say that according to the scouts, they all had to face a low-level devil. Among the conscripts and mercenaries, there were veterans who had even caught mid-level devils, so the commander believed that there should be no problems today. The commander encouraged his comrades and suggested that they do everything quickly. Thanks to this, Ruji believed that everything would go well today. As soon as the girl and her comrades entered the battle against the huge demon with a burning head, she realized that something went wrong. Ruji was shocked by the menacing and dangerous appearance of the great demon and understood that everything would not go as easily as it sounded in the report. Based on her experience, the girl understood that a low-level devil could not look like that, and it was definitely a great demon. After the unsuccessful attack, the summoned and mercenaries ran away from their enemy in terror, saying that they had no chance of winning. The commander ordered his subordinates to flee and leave the bodies of their fallen comrades for later. Ruji was not delighted with the order she heard. The girl believed that it was impossible to do this because there were still wounded there. The squad leader told the girl to obey silently because they had no time to talk. Suddenly, someone grabbed Ruji by the hand. The girl was scared when she saw the man who grabbed her and did not understand why he did it. The man turned to Ruji and suggested that she did not realize the situation they were in. He said that he was a veteran who caught low and mid-level devils. Ruji listened attentively to the man without even thinking of interrupting him. The reason was that half of the man's face was badly injured as a result of the unsuccessful attack. He continued to say that despite his experience, this was the first time he had been in such hell. The man also said that it would be a miracle if they just survived when faced with a high-level devil. So he asked Ruji to cast aside all doubts and run, because this was the only way. The girl demanded to be released and continued to insist that their comrades needed help, when suddenly an explosion sounded which attracted Ruji's attention. Looking to the side, she saw one of the summoned ones lying on the ground and screaming in terrible pain. The girl was horrified because the person called was her well-known comrade, whom she had known for many years. Ruji called loudly to Crofus, who was pinned to the ground by large rocks. Hearing this, the guy raised his head and was very surprised to see his girlfriend. Ruji immediately asked the guy where his weapon was and why he was lying on the ground. Crofus, a good boy, asked why the girl had not evacuated yet. This conversation attracted the attention of the great devil. The girl replied that it didn't matter and told the guy to get up and go to her. Crofus replied that he couldn't get up. The thing is that as a result of the explosion, the guy's right leg was seriously injured and, in addition, was pinned to the ground by stones. But Crofus did not lose optimism and said that he would come soon, so the girl had to run. While the guy was saying this, he did not notice that the great devil had already approached him. However, Crofus turned his head back and saw his opponent, which made him dumbfounded and very nervous. At the same time, Ruji, who did not listen to her partner's advice and did not run away, had already loaded her bow with an arrow and was getting ready to shoot. The girl was completely focused and thought that she would not allow the great devil to kill her friend. Ruji believed that she had to distract the enemy so that Crofus could hide. After these thoughts, the girl decided that she needed to aim Shikrush right in the eye in order to definitely attract his attention to herself. She was already ready to shoot, but she believed that if she came a little closer, she would definitely be able to hit the coveted target. Without weakening her hand, Ruji held the arrows tightly, not letting go, and waited for her opponent to come a little closer. At this time, one of the guys participating in the attack tried to keep away from the great devil as quickly as possible. His legs were shaking and buckling. He was so scared and very nervous. The collector, mad with fear, shouted loudly that he had to survive and ordered everyone to get out of his way. The guy looked at the great devil with horror, but did not stop for a moment and continued to run. The collector did not see Ruji standing in his way, and running past, he touched her with his hand, causing the girl to immediately lose concentration. Ruji realized with horror what had just happened and looked towards the great devil. The arrow that the girl had been preparing for so long flew out of the bow at great speed and flew towards the formidable enemy. Despite all the preparation, she flew past without hitting the great devil in the eye as Ruji wanted. The girl looked at the top-level devil with great despair and fear in her eyes and understood that her attempt to save her friend had completely failed. The collector continued to run away with the same horror, not understanding that it was because of him that the girl had missed. At that moment, Shikrush, turning his hand into a fist, swung it in order to strike back at the people. The summoned and mercenaries watched this with horror, holding their breath, because they understood how powerful this blow would be. This dangerous sight brought even the collector to his senses, from which he stopped and began to look closely at the great devil with fear in his eyes. The sight was truly terrifying. Shikrush, whose eyes were shining brightly and whose horned head was burning, opened his mouth and looking menacingly at the people, tried to attack them. Kim Sung-ju was very nervous and asked his new acquaintance to fly even faster. Trikal, on whose shoulder the main character was sitting, answered that this was his maximum speed. Suddenly, a fairy turned to the guy and said that she felt the approach of the withering energy, which meant that Shikrush would not be found soon. The great devil also felt it. Moreover, taking a deep breath, he smelled the scent of his old friend. Trickle also felt that Shikrush's energy had weakened greatly. Hearing this, Kim Seong-jun found it hard to believe, since he had already seen the consequences of the great devil's actions. The main character was very surprised that the entire valley where Shikrush operated was burned out and did not understand how much power this devil possessed. He saw his friend Trickle from afar and thought about it, after which he assumed that he had lost his mind. The devil began to regret that he had come to meet him, but he would not even be able to say hello. Suddenly, Hot Chocolate drew the attention of the glorious hero to the fact that there were hunters in the valley who were in danger. Kim Sung-ju understood that Ruji was somewhere there, so it was necessary to act urgently. The protagonist was surprised that there were many more survivors than they thought, so he asked the fairy if the great devil had really weakened, as Trickle had said. Hot Chocolate denied this and suggested that the devil was simply absorbing people's fear. He then reminded the protagonist that angels and devils used to become stronger from the number of worshippers. The fairy continued to say that if they could not receive worship, they began to feed on the fear, horror, and despair of people. The main character asked if the great devil had killed the hunters on purpose to become stronger. The fairy confirmed these words. At this time, Trickle could not believe that his old friend had gone crazy and did not understand what to do. After thinking a little, the great devil suddenly declared that he would fight Shikrush. This surprised the main character very much. He did not believe that the great devil wanted to kill his friend whom he had been looking for so long, but there was nothing to do. Trickle explained that as soon as the Akshais lost their minds, they started to destroy everything around them. Akshay without mind was no longer Akshay, but simply a monster. The great devil continued to say that there was nothing to do, and all that was left was to kill Shikrush. After this, Trickle prepared to make a strong dash forward to quickly approach his friend. Kim Sung-ju was shocked by what he heard and did not understand who the Akshays were and what Trickle was planning. An unexpected fairy warned the guy to get ready because the impact of the Great Devil's power would be enormous, and if the angel did not spread his wings properly, trouble would happen. Kim Sung-ju was shocked and asked Hot Chocolate to repeat everything again, while Trickle was already preparing to push off the ground in order to rush forward. The next moment, the Great Devil ran at great speed towards his old friend, completely unaware that the main character could not hold on and fell from his shoulder. Kim Sung-ju fell down, and for some time could not comprehend what was happening to him. He was dumbfounded by the fact that too many events had happened recently. After some time, the main character came to his senses and immediately realized that he was now falling straight down at great speed, no longer having the opportunity to use his wings. The main character felt like his chest was constricting and it felt like his head was about to explode. Kim Sung-ju fell down at great speed and did not understand where he was. After some time opening his eyes, the guy saw several dark silhouettes in front of him who were addressing him by name. One of the voices seemed familiar to the main character. Suddenly, he realized that this voice belonged to Ruji. Thanks to this, the guy remembered that he came to this valley to save his girlfriend from the Great Devil. But the main character could not remember whether Trickle defeated his old friend who had lost his mind. Kim Sung-ju also began to remember that before this, he had discovered a new skill called Divine Power Shield and seemed to have used it to protect people. Suddenly, the main character felt someone touch his hand and a voice asked the guy to come to his senses. A worried Ruji stood over the angel, asking with tears in her eyes if everything was okay with him. The exhausted protagonist looked at the girl, not understanding what had happened to him and where he was now. Meanwhile, it was already late evening. The hunters had set up camp and were caring for the victims. Food was prepared on a large fire for all participants in the campaign against Shikrush. Ruji began to loudly ask how this happened and scold the main character for coming to such a dangerous place. The girl said that Kim Song had been unconscious for half a day and she was very worried. After that, she thanked the guy for saving her and asked how he managed to deal with the Great Devil alone. The main character asked the girl to calm down, after which he explained that he simply put up a shield and that Trickle was fighting Shikrush. Ruji was surprised when she heard this name. The girl immediately asked who it was. Kim Sung-ju couldn't believe that his friend didn't notice someone so big and noisy. Suddenly, a fairy intervened in the conversation and told the main character that Trickle had already left a long time ago. The guy was surprised by this. Hot Chocolate continued to say that at the end, Trickle said that he needed to leave urgently, and since all the people lost consciousness as soon as the main character's shield was destroyed, no one saw him. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju became upset and began to regret that he did not even thank the Great Devil for his help. Suddenly, a man entered the tent and was glad that the main character had already woken up, after which he asked how he was feeling. It was the leader of the expedition to Shikrush named Falenta. He said that the main character saved all the participants of this expedition. These words surprised the main character. Falenta already knew the guy's name because he had heard about him from Ruji and therefore gave his name. After this, the man expressed his deep gratitude to the boy and said that they, along with the other hunters, were going to collect Shikrush's body. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju immediately jumped up from his seat and asked if he could go with the hunters. Falenta replied that of course he could go with them, but the main thing was that the guy was feeling okay. The main character will answer that everything was fine with him. As soon as Kim Sung-ju took a few steps, his consciousness immediately became clouded, and his head began to spin violently. The guy did not understand what was happening to it. After this, the guy threw up a lot. Ruji was shocked by this unexpectedness and asked if everything was okay with the main character. Kim Sung-ju answered again that everything was fine with him, and he just felt dizzy. Falenta decided not to ride off and wait for the guy. The fairy assumed that the main character's characteristics had increased so quickly that he felt sick, so she advised him to check the interface. The guy did so and saw that his divine power had increased fourfold. Hot Chocolate was delighted by this and explained that the angel was worshipped by people, which is why his divine power increased so quickly, but the protagonist did not understand how he deserved to be worshipped. The fairy assumed that the guy was worshipped by the people from the raid, because they survived thanks to the main character's shield, and the fear of Shikrush was replaced by gratitude and hope for the angel. The fairy also added that of course the guy got all this just like that, thanks to Trickle's intervention, and hoped that next time the main character would be able to raise his divine power on his own. Falenta turned to the main character and asked if it was possible for the guy to wait until his condition stabilized and then go with them. Kim Seong-ju started saying that everything was fine with him and asked the head of the expedition to take him with him because the guys really wanted to see. Still, the main character was allowed to go with the hunters. After some time, the guy, barely moving his legs, walked to the site of the recent battle. Kim Seong-ju held his head because it was still spinning, but nevertheless, the guy had no intention of stopping. Finally, Falenta turned to the main character and said that they had already arrived at the right place. In a large depression in the ground lay the bones of the great devil, still burning. Seeing this, the main character was very surprised that Shikrush's skull was completely now. The fairy replied that it was not a joke and said that Trickall broke the skull of an old friend with his bare hands. Afterwards, Hot Chocolate described the process with admiration as if someone had squeezed an orange hard, causing the juice to fly everywhere. Unexpectedly, Falenta turned to the main character and said that he could look for something interesting because a lot of money could be made on the remains of the great devil. The guy liked what he heard, and he decided to immediately see if there was anything worthwhile here. To do this, the main character spread his angel wings, because from a bird's eye view, it was possible to see everything much better. Kim Seong-ju quickly rose into the sky and began to carefully look at the remains of the great devil. Very soon, something caught the attention of the main character, which surprised him greatly. Some object that was almost completely buried in the sand was shining brightly, reflecting the light from the fire. So far, the main character could not understand what kind of object it was. After some time, Kim Seong-ju turned to Folent and said that he had found something. The main character held a huge, perfectly smooth red ball in his hands with admiration and asked if this stone was precious. The leader of the expedition was surprised when he saw the boy's find and said that it was the pocket of demonic energy of the great devil. Kim Seong-ju still did not understand what kind of object it was. Then the man explained that it was a clot of mana and it was usually located right in the devil's heart. When a devil died, the demonic energy in his heart would take the form of such a clot. One of the men added that this stone looked beautiful but was actually useless, and unlike monsters, the pocket of demonic energy of the devil would disintegrate after some time. Almost crying with grief, Kim Seong-ju asked if it was really impossible to make money from this find. Falenta confirmed this. The man also added that if you leave this clot with you, then in about 12 hours it will disappear. The main character picked it up, but for some reason still didn't want to throw it away. Suddenly, the pocket of demonic energy of the great devil right in the boy's hands began to crack, and a bright light seemed to burst out from it. Kim Seong-ju was surprised and at the same time fascinated by this view and did not understand what was happening. The main character saw that cracks appeared on the pocket of demonic energy, and with each second there were more and more of them, and small particles were already flying apart. The next moment, the clot of mana completely shattered into separate fragments, and a bright light began to burst out from within. At that moment, the system reported that the guy had received a large amount of demonic energy. While everyone present was surprised by what had happened, the system reported that the demonic energy had been transformed into divine power, and its surplus had been replaced with experience points. The main character was glad that in the end his find turned out to be very useful, because now he had the 24th level, and his sacred power was 241 points. On a large wooden table were neatly stacked some documents, and next to it stood several bottles with various liquids. Suddenly, the phone rang in the room. The girl put the phone to her ear and said that the caller had reached Moron's hospital. It turned out that they called the hospital about the trip to Shikrush and reported that all the participants were already returning back. The girl immediately asked how many people were injured. A nurse at Maro's hospital named Solenmia was very surprised when she heard that among the people who were returning back, there was not a single patient with serious injuries. When an exploratory group such as a hike or raid departs for the nearest hospital, a state of emergency is declared. The head of the hospital, Maros, announced to his subordinates that the next step in the plan was a march to Shikrush, in which 100 people were going, so everyone had to be ready. The workers did not know exactly when the hunters would return, but they expected them within 24 hours. Due to the large number of wounded, the medical staff was under enormous strain. But despite this, he had no other choice at Maro's hospital because they needed to help all the wounded. But this time, everything was somehow strange. One of the participants in the hike took the nurse by the hands. Crofus greeted the beautiful girl, and noticing the dark circles under her eyes, assumed that she had suffered greatly because of the wounded hunters. The guy was about to suggest to the shocked Solenmia to go on a meeting with him, but Ruji quickly calmed her friend down. After that, the girl apologized to the nurse, and together with Crofus, they left. Solenmia was surprised at how kind this patient was. One of the doctors cannot believe that the hunters actually went on a raid, because they only had bruises, fractures, and abrasions as if they had played football. Solon Mia said that according to rumors, all of their patients today went hunting for the great devil, and it was a miracle that there were no seriously injured people among them. The nurse's colleague thought that this was very strange, because before their patients had suffered much more serious injuries, although they did not go on such dangerous missions. The doctor also did not understand how it could happen that only one child, who was brought in the arms of the head of the campaign Falon, ended up in the hospital. Solon Mia was surprised by this and did not understand why a child was participating in the city. Then the man said that his name was Kim Seong-ju and he was a conscript. The main character was unconscious after absorbing demonic energy, so he was the only patient who had to be immediately hospitalized. Suddenly, the doctor said that if the nurse had a chance, she should find out why this happened. He assigned this task to her. Solon Mia was very surprised by this. After some time, the nurse came to the room where the main character was. Falenta was also there and said that the guy had cured all the wounded. Ruji happily added that her friend was a healer. Solon Mia didn't know what that word was but assumed it meant healer. The head of the expedition, recalling what happened, continued to say that if it were not for Kim Seong-jun's healing abilities, the hunters would not have achieved such a result. Based on his rich experience, Falenta believed that the campaign against Shikrush was the worst of all that a man had ever taken part in. Although the hunters were able to kill the great devil, there were many wounded, so the man would not be surprised if they died right in that valley. But Kim Seong-ju quickly got to work and with his healing abilities helped everyone in need. Falenta believed that in that situation, the main character became a real savior for them all. While working, the guy received system messages that if his believers were in a sufficient area, then his sacred power and healing skills increased depending on the number of people. Falenta continued to say that the main character helped many of the wounded, after which he lost consciousness and remained in that state for 3 days. Solon Mia asked the man not to worry because the doctor had already examined Kim's son and said that the guy was just slightly exhausted and needed rest. The nurse continued to say that from today on she was assigned responsibility for the main character and would monitor the condition of this patient. Looking at Kim Seong-ju, the girl admired the fact that such a small child was able to heal so many people on his own. After this, daily care of the main character began to bring joy to the nurse. The first thing she did in the morning was open the windows in Kim Seong-jun's room so that my beloved patient could breathe clean, fresh air. In addition to air, bright sunlight penetrated into the room, and then the main character's hair began to shine brightly. When Solon Mia looked at this, it seemed to her that even her eyes were being cleansed by the healing light. Since ancient times, this world has been full of magicians and scientists. Magical arts such as witchcraft developed here. They said that somewhere in the East, there were spells with the help of which it was possible to return the life of one person by sacrificing hundreds of other lives in return. But Solon Mia thought that not a single book spoke about the ability to save people just like that. The nurse had never heard of healers like the main character. In other words, the girl thought that Kim Seong-ju was unique. Thinking about this, she began to extend her hand to the guy. Putting her hand on his head, the nurse smiled and wished that her beloved patient, whom she admired, would wake up as quickly as possible. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of the room asking permission to enter. Solon Mia was frightened by the surprise. The girl immediately took her hand away from the main character and said that visitors could enter the room. Kim Seong-jun's ward was never empty because there were always people who brought the main character gifts and flowers as a sign of gratitude. Of course, the guy was visited by the hunters he saved. One of the visitors said that today he also bought a bouquet. The nurse replied that if the hunter keeps it, she will decorate the ward with it. Friends, comrades, and family members of those hunters also came to visit Kim Seong-jun. Even leaders of large guilds and famous adventurers who were in no way connected with him visited the main character. There were so many gifts and flowers that Solon Mia began to doubt whether there were too many of them. The entire room was literally filled with flowers brought by visitors as a token of gratitude. The nurse was afraid that this might make Kim Seong-jun uncomfortable, and so the guy would ask to remove all of this. The girl was surprised that although the main character had a weak body, he had such magical power that he attracted so many people, and therefore believed that this child was so outstanding that she would never be able to realize it. The man in the black suit who suddenly appeared in the room agreed with the girl's words. The stranger continued to say that the main character's abilities, appearance, and character indicated that there was not a single ordinary feature in him. Master Chile asked if the nurse agreed with these words. Solon Mia couldn't answer anything because she was thinking about who this man was and why he was here because visiting hours had already ended. A man in a black suit, accompanied by a silent girl, began to approach the bed in which the main character was lying and asked how much time had passed. Taking one of the roses from the bouquet, Chile clarified that he was asking about how many days Kim's son had been in this hospital. The nurse replied that the guy had been hospitalized 3 days ago. Hearing this, the man was surprised and thought that the main character had been sleeping for quite a long time. At the same time, he brought a flower to the guy's hair. After this, Chile apologized for coming so suddenly and said that he had already left so the nurse could continue her procedures. Heading towards the exit, the man turned to the girl who was his secretary and asked if she had brought the documents. A girl named Saul, holding some folder in her hand, replied that her boss lost documents every day, so she didn't even put them away anymore. Taking the documents, Chile asked what the secretary would do if he hadn't lost them. The girl replied that she would have carried them with her anyway. After that, the man took the documents out of the folder and began to look at them carefully. Previously, the man thought that the main character would be suited to be a support, so he looked for a suitable job for him. But now Chile saw that the guy would be more suited to fighting. The man then said that today he came just to look at Kim Sung-joon and he would talk to him next time. Soon, Chile said that it was time for him to go and asked the nurse to say hello to the main character as soon as he woke up. The man also said that he would leave his gift here. Suddenly, Secretary Sol put a large suitcase on the table that was intended for Kim Sung-joon. Solon Mia was surprised by this and asked from whom she should say hello to the main character. The man, smiling good-naturedly, asked the nurse to tell the boy that Chile had come to see him because he was sure that the main character would understand who they were talking about. Kim Sung-joo seemed to hear this in his sleep and seemed displeased with the arrival of this visitor. The vase in which the roses were standing fell with a crash and broke. Glass fragments and water scattered across the floor. Solon Mia, entering the ward the next day, was very surprised by what she saw. Kim Sung-joo sat on his bed carefree and looked out the window, trying to remember what happened to him. The main character was distracted from these thoughts by a nurse who asked in surprise if the guy had finally woken up. Kim Song looked at the girl in surprise. Suddenly, he called her aunt and asked who she was. Solon Maya was struck by lightning when he addressed her in this way, because she was a young girl. Although the main character had already woken up, until this moment the nurse did not know about his true character, which surprised her very much. After some time, Solon Mia took the main character to his doctor so that he could check the guy's health. Dr. Huklim, studying the documents, said that, apart from the fact that the guy was unconscious for a week, all his indicators looked good. After this, the doctor turned to his patient and asked if Kim Sung-joon had anything that was bothering him or was different from the norm. The guy replied that the food was tasteless and even for a hospital it was too much. After that, the guy asked if the doctor had a cook pub or something like that. Solon Mia was not yet accustomed to the character of the main character and wondered why this child behaved like this. When he slept, he looked like an angel, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he turned out to be a rude person. Dr. Huklim was also not delighted with the behavior of his patient, but he restrained himself and endured everything. The nurse noticed this and told the doctor that the guy had recently encountered the great devil. The girl continued to say that since the main character was still very young, perhaps this had a negative effect on his psyche. Solon Maya decided to sort everything out before the doctor got confused. Looking sternly at his subordinate, the doctor said that he would draw the conclusions here, but the man nevertheless admitted that this time the nurse made a good remark. The doctor continued to study the documents, which stated that the main character was a man aged 26. Suddenly, Huklim asked if Kim's son had a girlfriend. The guy started telling that the story of his love life was very confusing, and if he started to figure it out, there would be no end to it, so the doctor should have prepared some napkins to wipe away his tears later. Dr. Huklim was very intrigued by these words and seemed ready to listen to everything that Kim Sung-joo would tell him. Suddenly, the man reached for a large bottle of red wine and asked if it would work as napkins. This struck the nurse as if she had been struck by lightning. She was very surprised and told the doctor that the small child should not have been given alcohol. Huklim replied that the guy was not a child because he was already 26 years old. At this time, Kim Seong-ju was holding high-quality wine in his hand, which was 72 years old. The nurse continued to say that in any case, the guy was their patient. To this, the doctor, who was a drinker, replied that the guy was already completely healthy and could be discharged. After this, Huklim turned to the main character and said that he even gave him a gift and therefore asked him to be more careful and not to return wounded. The doctor then went on to say that the boy could heal people simply by touching them, but advised him not to rely solely on his skills, but to learn instead. The doctor also said that in our time, young people could study medicine even from books, so he suggested that Kim Seong-ju take one as a gift from his library. The main character already wanted to refuse, saying that he didn't need the books, but Solenmia suddenly shut his mouth and thanked the doctor for the valuable gift. After this, the girl led the guys out of the doctor's office, saying that she would finish her work and discharge them. Looking after Kim Seong-ju as he left, the doctor thought that this guy didn't even know the basics of medicine. He did not know what the circulatory system was and what the aorta was, and only had the knowledge he received in biology lessons at school. But nevertheless, this knowledge was enough for him, because the main thing he knew was that if the heart stops, the person will die. The doctor continued to think that the main character used his skills to perfectly heal the participants of the expedition, and it turned out that the path that the doctors had been following for decades was useless. Huck Lim was already over 70 years old, but he could never have imagined that he would envy a child with unique abilities. The elderly man thought that this was annoying. Returning to the ward where the main character was lying, Solenmia breathed a sigh of relief, saying that she almost turned gray from excitement during the meeting with the doctor. After this, the girl holding the book she had wanted to receive for so long turned to Kim Seong-ju and asked if he really wasn't afraid of adults at all. The main character replied that he was also an adult, so he had nothing to be afraid of. After which he asked what happened to his things, in which he arrived at the hospital. The girl reported that among the numerous gifts that people brought, there were also new clothes that the guy could change into. Kim Seong-ju was surprised by this. After this, the main character noticed a battered brown suitcase and annoyedly suggested that the clothes in it might not be very good. Kim Seong-ju was about to refuse, but suddenly he thought about it and decided that whatever clothes he had there would be better than what he had now. After some time, the main character changed his clothes. The guy's appearance amazed Solenmia. The girl was delighted and thought that these clothes suited Kim Seong-jun very well. Reluctantly, the main character agreed with this, adding that these clothes were also comfortable. The girl was even more touched when she saw that the guy was embarrassed. Suddenly, the guy received a system message which said that the uniform was embroidered with pieces of starlight. This surprised the main character. The message also said that thanks to this uniform, the body became lighter and added 120 PP points. Kim Seong-ju could not remember what this abbreviation meant. Suddenly, a fairy appeared out of nowhere and explained that PP stood for Protect Point, which was a numerical value and equivalent to a shield that covered the skin. The main character was very scared out of surprise and reflexively attacked hot chocolate in order to throw the supposed danger away from you. For some time, the guy trembled with fear and said loudly that he had already asked the fairy not to scare him. The fairy explained that she was simply happy to meet the main character. Hot Chocolate continued to say that in any case, it was very good equipment and asked who the main character got it from. Solenmia replied that these clothes were left by a man named Chile. This man also asked the main character to come to him when he was discharged. The nurse added that he himself came here to visit the guy while he was unconscious. Kim Seong-ju was very surprised that Master Chile himself came to meet him. Still, the main character thought that since he had received clothes from the guild, he would have to go there once. His house was nearby anyway. After some time, the guy came to the manager of the house where he lived and was very surprised by what he was told. The man asked the main character not to be so surprised. Meanwhile, Kim Seong-ju was very nervous and angry, which is why he clenched his hand into a fist. The manager continued to say that the villa in which the guy lived was being transferred to the next tenant, since no one had been there for more than a month. The main character did not understand what kind of laws these were, because he had been on a campaign the whole time. The man replied that this was precisely why the guy needed to be warned about this in advance. After that, the manager showed the contract and said that everything was clearly written in it. Kim Seong-ju was surprised that there was something there. The man then said that he was sorry, but he could not help the main character in any way. The guy was shocked and simply had no words. The manager said again that he was very sorry, after which the main character left the place that not long ago he considered his home. Shirley Fleiken was a city of the summoned, where everyone walked their own personal path. Some led a measured life, getting a regular job or starting their own business. And some left the city and became adventurers who explored this world. Still in shock, Kim Seong-ju took his few things and mindlessly wandered around the city, not understanding what he was supposed to do. In the case of the main character, it was safe to say that from the very beginning, he had no choice but to go on an adventure. Kim Sung-ju fell to the ground in the middle of the street and began to scream loudly that he did not want to become homeless, which attracted the attention of surprised passers-by. After hearing the main character's story, Rinko laughed and clarified that the guy now had nowhere to go. Kim Sung-ju said with regret that he didn't know it would turn out like this. The man said that he was sorry that it happened this way, but the guy did not despair and said that he could handle it. After this, Rinko, pouring tea for his guest, asked where he planned to go. The protagonist briefly answered that he would go where the money was. Then the man said that strong summons hunted big monsters or special creatures and rare things, but this was only suitable for a very small number of summons. Rinko, let's continue to say that those summoned, like the guy who was just getting used to life in the new world, usually went to the dungeon. Kim Seon-ju had only heard about the unknown spaces of the dungeon from rumors or guides. The dungeons contained hidden gold and silver treasures, as well as many other untold riches. But besides this, unique types of monsters that could not be seen from the outside slumber in the dungeons. For the summoned who went there to level up, the dungeon was a land of opportunity and the best place to hunt. The protagonist asked the man if he could go there alone. Rinko confirmed this and added that the dungeon was not always teeming with terrible monsters. The man then suggested that the boy would be able to find valuable objects there that he could endow with special power and turn them into items for ease of use. Unexpectedly, Rinko noticed the main character's clothes and assumed that they were also an item. Kim Sung-ju was surprised by this. Seeing the guy's reaction, the man asked if he didn't know about this. Then the main character said that he received these clothes when he was in the hospital from Master Chile. Hearing this, the man assumed that the guy interested his boss since he gave him such a gift. Suddenly, the main character remembered that he was going to visit Master Chile once to thank him. Rinko was surprised. He thought that the guy wanted to thank him because he received an order from him. Kim Seong-ju began to deny it and explained that he would just come to him when he had time. Hearing this, the man hoped that the main character would use his chance to get closer to Master Chile Angela, who was not really happy with this prospect, but he agreed. In fact, the reason the guy wanted to meet Chile ended up being that he just wanted information about Ronan's third Bible. Finding this Bible was the only task Kim Sung-jun had to complete. But this was just the guy's guess, and he was not sure that this was exactly what the divine dragon wanted from him. Unexpectedly, Rinko suggested that the main character's thoughts were troubled by the book he spoke about last time and said that he would not gather much information here. The man said that ordinary people did not know much about such treasures because information about them was monopolized by devil hunters. Kim Seong-ju replied with annoyance that he knew this. Then Rinko said that there were very few real devil hunters. They secretly roamed all over Shirley Fleiken and hunted down devils and rare monsters in order to obtain treasures. But fortunately for Kim Sung-jun, Master Chile was especially close to these hunters. That's why the man assumed that perhaps his boss already knew about the existence of the Bible, which interested the main character so much. After this conversation, Kim Sung-ju went to the city to prepare for an important matter and visit the local market. The fairy turned to the main character and said that he had not heard anything useful and suggested that the guy was now going on a journey. Kim Sung-ju replied that he had nothing else to do in the city, and even though Rinko had prepared a backpack for him for the trip, there were still a lot of things missing in it. Suddenly, the main character heard a weapon shop merchant loudly calling out to customers, saying that he had received new items from the forge. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju decided to begin his preparations for the journey by acquiring weapons. The main character immediately opened the door and entered the weapons shop. The merchant greeted his customer. Kim Seong-ju was surprised by the abundance of various weapons that were sold here. Suddenly, Hot Chocolate asked the guy if a healer really needed a weapon. The main character replied that he could not walk around this dangerous world with bare hands, so he had to buy some kind of protective equipment. For some time, the guy walked between the racks of weapons and thought about what would be best for him to use. The fairy said that the best weapon for the guy would be a bow to attack from long distances, since the main character was not very good in close combat. Kim Sung-ju didn't like this idea because he didn't like to attack from afar. Suddenly, the guy noticed the sword. The protagonist thought that this was a good option because it was always believed that the sword was the king of all weapons. The fairy replied that from the point of view of efficiency, it was better to buy a battle axe. Kim Sung-ju continued to insist on buying the sword. Then Hot Chocolate asked the guy if there was any special reason for it. The protagonist replied that it looked cool. From what he heard, the fairy sent lightning. She could not argue with such arguments. However, she said that the guy would not be suitable for a cutting weapon because the hunters who used the sword filled it with energy, and due to training the sword got stuck. But with the divine power that the main character possessed, this would not work because they contradicted each other. The boy's divine power was not intended for attack. It was a defensive energy like a shield that protected the knight. The fairy continued to say that this was why buying cutting weapons was ineffective, but Kim Seong-ju did not listen to her and was already completing the purchase of weapons. Hot Chocolate noticed this and looked at the counter and saw that the main character was buying himself a huge mace with sharp spikes. Kim Seong-ju said that he understood that cutting weapons were not suitable for him, and therefore he bought something that he could hit with using his divine power. The arms dealer was very surprised to see a seemingly small child buying such a dangerous weapon. He warned the guy that the mace was very heavy and asked if the main character was sure that he could lift it. Kim Seong-ju replied that everything was fine and asked to sell him the weapon. The owner of the gun shop did not contradict his client. Having put his new acquisition in his backpack, the main character began to say that he liked the mace more than he had previously thought. The fairy did not share the guy's enthusiasm. After this, Hot Chocolate assumed that this was the end of the shopping trips, since it seemed that the main character did not need anything else. Kim Seong-ju thought for a moment and replied that he needed to buy one more thing that was the most important. The fairy was very surprised by this and did not understand what else the guy needed. At this time, the main character looked around, trying to find a place where he could buy it. Finally, the guy found what he needed. The main character really wanted to buy a hat before the trip because he didn't have any headwear. For Kim Seong-jun, the journey was as emotional as buying a new hat, and for others, it was a lot of hard work. Tangled roads, countless monsters, and dangerous adventures that made the future unpredictable attracted a small group of travelers who were ready to wander for a long time along forest paths. They could not use horses and ride on horseback because the road was unpredictable. In addition, they were plagued by minor misfortunes along the way, such as a broken flashlight. The difficulties and dangers ahead did not frighten the travelers, and they continued their adventures. Only fatigue and hunger could make them stop for a while. These adventures led travelers to treasures that were unknown to the world and to mysterious creatures and monsters, and then new encounters awaited them. One of the adventure participants decided that since the sun had already set, the group should stop here for the night. A guy named Panted, who was the leader of the Panted team, climbed a small mountain to look around. The guy peered into the quiet night forest and anticipated what he and his comrades would encounter on the way tomorrow. After these thoughts, he decided that he should have a good rest before tomorrow. The Patriot team was a small group of conscripts who began to seek adventure. One evening, as usual, they set up camp and prepared for the next day. It was a group of people who constantly hunted and gained experience in order to grow, despite the fact that none of them had any special abilities. One of the team members said that there were quite a lot of monsters in the area that could suddenly attack, so maybe it wasn't worth lighting a fire, but they didn't want to freeze from the cold either. Panted thought about how to solve this dilemma because he had a lot of experience and therefore he was always careful. Still, the guy decided that he would go scout out the surrounding area and return, and his comrades were supposed to set up camp and wait for him. The team members were surprised that their leader was seriously planning to go alone. Panted asked them not to worry because he would only be gone for a short time, especially since there was little kerosene in the lantern. Taking the lantern, the leader warned his team that he was already leaving. One of the guys asked the boss to be more careful and promised to cook him dinner. After the captain left, the rest of the team, who were tired after a long journey, decided that they needed to quickly finish their duties and rest. Panted made his way alone through the dense, dark forest, and lighting his way with a lantern, was surprised that there were more stones around than he thought. Climbing a small mountain, the guy thought that although it made movement difficult, it would also be difficult for a monster to attack here, so these stones served as good protection. Stopping to rest after the difficult climb, Panted looked around and suddenly saw something in the darkness. The guy noticed some black silhouette not far from him, from which he immediately squatted down and hid in order to get a good look at everything. Panted thought he saw some kind of monster in front of him, but it looked small. However, the guy immediately took up his sword, sensing danger. The guy tried to examine his opponent in as much detail as possible, but because of the darkness, he could not see him well. At the same time, he thought that if it was a monster, then before it attacked him, the guy would be able to escape and call his team for help. As soon as Panted's eyes got used to the darkness and began to see better, he realized that he was wrong. The guy was very surprised by what he saw in front of him. Kim Seong-ju, leaning his back against a tree, slept peacefully, not noticing that a stranger had approached him. Because of the main character's appearance, Panted thought that it was a doll. The guy quickly discarded this idea because the doll was not asleep. Panted still could not understand what or who he saw in front of him. Being very nervous, the team leader Panted accidentally touched a bush, which caused a barely noticeable noise. This was enough to wake up Kim Sung-ju, who, despite all this, was not afraid despite the fact that he was completely alone in the dark forest. Panted saw this and became even more frightened and did not understand what he should do. Still, the guy turned to the main character and asked what it was. Kim Sung-ju was surprised to hear someone's voice from the forest. The main character saw the guy and replied that he was Kim Sung-jun, but Panted wasn't asking that. At the same time, the guy sighed with relief because there was an ordinary person in front of him. The main character said that he got lost and therefore decided to stop here for the night. Panted asked if the stranger was really lost. Kim Sung-ju confirmed this and added that he was hunting here. Hearing this, Panted assumed that the guy was here with his comrades. Then the main character replied that he had no comrades and no home either because he was a hunter. To this, Panted said that even if the guy was a hunter, it was still dangerous to be alone in such a place, especially since he did not have a tent or sleeping bag. Kim Sung-ju was surprised by what he heard and asked if he couldn't just sleep on the ground. Panted thought the guy was overconfident. After that, he said that there was nothing to do and unexpectedly suggested that the main character follow him. He then said that his team's camp was nearby. The smoke from the fire rose high into the sky and was clearly visible from afar. After some time, Kim Sung-ju was already at the Panted team camp and was having dinner with the food that was shared with him. The girl with an unusual hair color, looking at the main character, believed that even God was heartless because he stole a child from Shirley Fleiken. Her friend agreed with this. After this, the girls clarified the name of their guest, Kim Sung-ju. Hearing positive answers, all members of the team immediately realized that he was the very healer everyone was talking about. Next, they asked the protagonist to demonstrate his healing abilities, but Panted asked his comrades not to distract the man from eating. After that, he apologized for the behavior of his friends and said that everyone was surprised because they met the man about whom they had talked so much. Kim Sung-ju responded that everything was fine and that they eventually fed him. The guy who was sitting next to the main character thought that their meeting was predetermined by fate and invited him to go hunting with them tomorrow because there was a dungeon nearby. Kim Sung-ju was surprised when he heard the proposal to go into the dungeon with Team Panted. One of the team members said that they usually went in search of adventure and came here to go to the natural dungeon. The protagonist asked what natural dungeon meant. Unexpectedly, the guy in glasses volunteered to give a detailed explanation. He said that in this world there were an infinite number of types of dungeons, but if you try to organize them, you get several types, the first of which were dimensional dungeons. It was a simulated space that was modeled after places that exist in reality. They looked as if the real Shirley Fleichen was reflected in a mirror, but in fact, it was a completely different world. It repeated real historical events from the past, but sometimes events occurred there that did not happen in reality. Because of all this complexity, this type of dungeon was considered the most difficult. The second type included dark magic dungeons. Long ago, dark magicians who lived during the period of heavenly grace created places throughout the continent where they hid magical treasures in order to protect the magical civilization. The value of these treasures was astronomical, and if they were sold, the money would be enough to live happily for the rest of one's life. Because of this, these dungeons were preferred by most adventurers. Panted continued to explain that in the end, the third type of dungeons were the ones their team was heading to, namely the natural dungeons. They had no special features. In such dungeons, one strong monster hid, and the rest were attracted to its energy, so the space around was already dangerous. Panted continued to say that such places were also popular among the summoned, because there were a lot of monsters here, and if you were lucky, you could get something useful. After that, Kim Sung-ju said that he heard that if you go into such a dungeon, most hunters couldn't even breathe because of the dark energy. Panted confirmed that this had indeed happened, but it shouldn't have happened here. The protagonist believed that the natural dungeons were places for low-level hunters. Then, one of the team members told Kim Sung-jun that if he couldn't decide whether to go with them or not right away, he could give his answer in the morning. After this, he turned to Panted and asked if such conditions would be normal. The team leader confirmed this. The main character was also told that a place to spend the night was already ready, and they offered him to sleep in a tent. The guy thanked his new acquaintances for this. Left alone, Kim Sung-ju began to meticulously think about the offer to go into the dungeon with the Pantheon team. Seeing that the guy was too tense because of this question, The fairy asked if he was going to go to the dungeon with his new acquaintances. The main characters answered that he would not like to do this, especially since he was suspicious that they helped him just like that. The fairy said that these people did not look like the kidnappers. After that, she was surprised that Kim Song was so suspicious. The guy explained that this was a place where you couldn't trust anyone, and you always had to think with a cool head. Hot Chocolate was surprised by this answer because it seemed to him that everything was just the opposite. The fairy remembered that when the guy talked to his new acquaintances about the dungeons, he looked very pleased. These conversations around the fire made the protagonist's eyes shine brighter than ever. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju was very surprised and could not believe that he actually looked like that from the outside. Still, the guy said that now he couldn't go to the dungeon alone, and it would be good to go there while there was an opportunity. The fairy asked if he had really decided to go with the team. Kim Sun confirmed this with a smile and said that first he needed to get some rest because they were going out into the dungeon early the next morning. The next day was coming very soon. The rays of the bright sun that peeked out from behind a large rock illuminated the camp of the Panted team. One of the team members said that apparently the interior space in the dungeon was quite large. Panted added that a monster called Overlike lived in it. The comrades agreed with their boss and said that there had never been such strong monsters in these areas. Except for this, Kim Sun asked what the word overlike meant. The guy asked the main character to imagine an overgrown wolf and said that all these surroundings were ruled by one huge wolf who even drove out the overlike who was a liar before. The main character asked if it was the monster who came up with such a name for himself. Panted laughed at this because the monster couldn't come up with a name for himself and said that the hunters gave him such a nickname. Kim Sung-ju thought that these hunters had no imagination at all and were bad at coming up with names for Panted's monsters. These words hurt Panted. The guy said that now the main character had to be careful because he was not a tank, and if the monsters hit him, the guy would suffer. After this, the group leader asked Kim Sung-jun not to worry because if anything happened, he would always cover for him, and added that they had to enter the dungeon before sunrise. As they made their way deeper into the dungeon, the Panted team members realized that no light penetrated into the cave at all. Even with a flashlight, it was dark, so everyone had to be careful and follow Panted. Suddenly, the main character received a system notification that the reshade skill was activated automatically, but the guy didn't seem surprised at all. Kim Sung-jun was more surprised that one of the Panted team members used a flashlight. The protagonist suggested that his new acquaintances did not use torches at all. To this, the fairy said that they were already outdated because Shirley Fleiken did not lag behind in technology. Suddenly, the guy who was walking in front of Kim Sung-jun stopped and began to look at your flashlight with surprise. Panted immediately asked his friend what happened. The guy explained that his flashlight was dead and asked if anyone had any spare batteries. The girl with turquoise hair replied that all the batteries were gone and that this was the last one. At that moment, the second flashlight that the team had also died. Kim Sung-ju was surprised that his new acquaintances did not stock up on batteries when they were in the city of Koret. As soon as the guy took the flashlight in his hand, the system immediately reported that it was an old flashlight that did not shine well because its battery was almost dead, so it was useless. Then the guy with glasses suggested waiting until midday, when the sun's rays would break through into the cave. The second guy noted that in that case they wouldn't be able to hunt normally. Panted calmed his comrades, who had begun to argue and conflict with each other, and said that everything was not so bad that hunting was impossible. The girl agreed with this and suggested using a combat flash to illuminate the path. Hearing this, the main character was surprised and asked what the battle flash was. The girl showed a small ball and said that if you throw it before the fight, it will brightly illuminate everything around, but they were very expensive. Hearing this, Kim Seong became curious about whether he could illuminate the space with the light of blessing. The fairy thought that it would take away a lot of divinity. Unexpectedly, the main first thing was the system notification that he had received a new skill that summoned a sphere of divine power illuminating the path ahead. This was just what was needed at the moment, so Kim Sung-ju immediately used this new one, after which a sphere appeared in his hand that glowed brightly. The joyful protagonist turned to Panted to inform him that a solution to their problem had been found. Kim Sung-ju, showing off the glowing sphere, asked the boy if this light was enough to continue moving forward. The Pantheon team members were surprised that the main character even had such skills and thought that it was an inability, but magic. The guys explained that it was just a new skill, after which he asked if skills and magic were different. The girl explained that most magic could not be replaced by abilities. In magic, It was necessary to have an understanding of complex formulas and the structure of mana, and it could only be used by a person who understood the limits of his mana, but with abilities everything was different. Kim Sung-ju said that everything was clear to him, after which he went ahead without waiting for anyone. The girl assumed that the guy did not listen to her at all. Without even suspecting that danger was waiting for them ahead, Panted ordered his comrades to set out on their journey since they now had light. Suddenly, an ominous sound echoed throughout the dungeon, which immediately drew the attention of the Panted team members. Kim Sung-ju asked the captain what that sound was. Without answering the question, Panted asked the protagonist to step back. Suddenly, several huge, poisonous snakes with the head of a wolf appeared in front of our heroes. The dangerous monsters immediately turned their gaze to the hunters. The captain reminded his comrades that they had to be careful, because they all knew how dangerous this monster was. After that, he asked permission to deal with the snake. As soon as the monster approached our heroes, Panted commanded his team to prepare to attack the enemy. Everyone immediately took their places and prepared to defend themselves from the monster's attacks. A snake with a wolf's head, opening its mouth wide, attacked the guy with the shield, but he managed to defend himself and gave his comrades the opportunity to attack the monster. Panted realized that this was a great moment and swinging his sword cut off the monster's head, after which he praised his comrade for a job well done. After this, the team decided to deal with the next enemy. All this was watched from the side by a surprised Kim Sung-ju, who thought that the hunters were quite good at their job. The protagonist thought that the team not only had a bright and skillful fighting style like Ruji, but also an excellent knowledge of each other's maneuvers. Kim Sung-ju was slightly shocked and didn't even know how he could help in this situation because it seemed like everything was going as well as possible. Suddenly, the main character was approached by a worried hot chocolate. The guy was scared, not understanding what had happened. The fairy reported that one of the members of the Panted team was wounded in battle. The girl with turquoise hair was holding her hand, on which a deep bleeding wound was visible. Kim Sung-ju immediately ran up to the injured girl and asked if she was okay. The girl, trying to endure severe pain, said that she was bitten by a poisonous snake. Having heard this, the main character took her aside. After this, the guy asked the wounded girl if it was just a bite because the wound looked too serious. Suddenly, the protagonist received a system message warning that the snake's poison had entered the subject's body, and if the wound was healed before detoxification, it would be difficult to neutralize the poison later. Kim Sung-ju began to get nervous because he now knew that the girl had been poisoned, but he still did not understand how he could extract the poison from her body. At this moment, Hot Chocolate came to the aid of the main character and advised the guy to use the Healing Touch skill. Despite the guy's concerns, the fairy explained that this skill was not used to heal wounds. Thanks to it, it was possible to detect poison that had entered the body and neutralize it. The guy was very surprised by this. Hot Chocolate believed that the main character would succeed and advised him to just close his eyes and concentrate. Kim Sun raised his hand to the wounded girl. For some time, the guy could not bring himself to do this because he was very afraid of harming the girl. Still, he remembered the fairy's advice that he needed to close his eyes and concentrate on the process. Thanks to the use of the skill, the protagonist's hand began to glow with a bright light. The process of searching for snake venom began. Kim Sung-ju thought intently about how he was definitely somewhere in this body and imagined the poison as something dirty and foreign. After some time, Hot Chocolate asked the main character if he could feel anything. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju began to smile and confirmed that he had found what he was looking for. While removing the snake venom from the wound, the guy received a system message that the divine power had discovered a new property, and now with its help it was possible to detect the poison. Also, thanks to this, the main character has unlocked a new level 1 detoxification skill. A satisfied Kim Sung-ju breathed a sigh of relief and stared at the poison he had managed to pull out. The system reported that the guy had managed to completely cleanse the girl's wound of the poison. After some time, all the poisonous wolf-headed snakes were defeated by the Panted team. The team leader breathed a sigh of relief and hid his sword because he had finally managed to kill all the opponents. One of the guys regretted that the blade of his sword had become dull due to the poison. Soon Panted noticed that the main character was nowhere to be seen and began to look around. Suddenly he saw how his comrades had huddled together. They were surprised and could not believe that everything worked out. The comrades thought that the skill that healed people was very cool and thought that it was something divine. They watched Kim Sung-ju's work and now understood why he was called a healer. The system reported that thanks to people's attention, the protagonist's divine power was restored, and the maximum reserve of strength increased. Hot Chocolate noticed that the guy was already tired and asked if he had overdone it by using his healing abilities beyond measure. Kim Song replied that he was fine for now, despite the fact that it was difficult to use the detox skill. The fairy warned that this skill required a large amount of divine power. Suddenly, one of the team members turned to the main character and asked if he could heal him. Kim Seong asked what was wrong with him. Then the guy, wiping away his tears, replied that he had suffered severe mental trauma, the cause of which was a broken heart. The main character started to get angry and say that he didn't have time to fool around. Panted watched all this with a smile. The guy thanked Kim Sung-joon because it was thanks to him that they no longer had any wounded. The main character replied that for him, it was nothing. The commander heard this and ordered his team to move forward, because they still had a long journey into the depths of the dungeon ahead of them. Everyone agreed with this. After some time and several encounters with monsters, Kim Sung-joo was completely exhausted and could barely move his legs. The guy didn't understand why there were so many monsters in these dungeons and assumed that Overlike wasn't here. Despite this, the team members were happy that they had collected a lot of cores. One of the guys looked into his bag and said that the monsters here had fairly large cores, and only with their help could one make good money. Then the main character asked if they wouldn't disappear just like the devil's core. One of the guys explained that these cores remained in the same state and were sold as a source of energy. The team members promised that as soon as they left the dungeon, they would definitely count Kim Sung-joon's share. The guy was glad to hear this. While she had a free minute, the main character decided to look into his interface in order to find out how much his level had grown. Kim Sung-joo was very surprised when he found out that he was now level 30 and did not understand how he could have grown so much. The fairy said that it was a very good hunting result and suggested that the guy's level had increased due to hunting high-level monsters and working together as a team. After this, the protagonist turned to his new comrades and asked why they did not use their skills during the hunt. Hearing this question, one of the girls was at first very surprised, after which he began to laugh loudly, making the guy perplexed. She assumed that the protagonist did not know everything and explained that the abilities were not something that every summoned could or wanted to use. Kim Song did not understand what the girl meant. The girl then suggested that the main character did not know about this because from the very beginning he received the skills of a healer, but the conditions for obtaining abilities were very strict. The guy continued to say that the skill could only be acquired by repeating the same action over and over again to maximize efficiency. If this path seemed too difficult, one could use the ability core, but even then the abilities could not be used as and when one wanted. This took a huge amount of mana and required a high level and experience. In addition, some abilities could cause negative effects. Panted Will continued to say that for using his ability, such negative effects should not follow. Therefore, he believed that it was a blessing Kim Seon-ju did not know about all this before. Suddenly, the team leader began to look around and assumed that judging by the landscape around them, they were already at their destination. The protagonist noticed a large hole in the ground and asked what it was for. Panted suggested that Overlike had forced his newly minted subordinates to dig it in order to ruin the passage. Suddenly, the main character felt something and began to inhale air deeply into his lungs in order to feel the strange smell. After that, he turned to his comrades and asked if they smelled sewage, but all the team members began to deny it, which surprised Kim Sun because the stench was terrible. Hot Chocolate suggested that no one else except the protagonist smelled this smell. Then the fairy said that usually this was called a feeling of energy. This could be understood if even when closing the nose, the smell did not disappear. This was just such a case. Kim Sung-joo closed his nose, but the smell did not go away. Suddenly, the main character noticed an old tree with a large hollow in it. It seemed that he came from there. Kim Seong-ju immediately called his comrades to look at his find. Pointing to a hollow in the village, the main character suggested that he had found the passage they needed. Kim Sung-ju believed that this was the entrance to Overlike's lair. Panted began to peer inside carefully and try to make out the passage, not understanding whether this was really what was needed. At this time, all the team members took their battle positions and were ready at any moment to repel an unexpected attack of monsters. Along the way, they asked the captain what he saw there. The main character said that it was too dark there and therefore suggested that he look at everything himself. The guy who was standing next to him replied that Kim Sun did not know what Overlike looked like, unlike Panthed. Kim Sung-ju was very surprised that no one present except the team captain had ever seen this monster. One of the guys said that the captain hunted Overlike in his youth but lost him, although he was able to injure his paw. The main character asked if Overlike was so strong or Panted was weak. The guy replied that it wasn't quite like that and continued to say that Overlike was very strong, and even just hitting him with a sword was already an achievement. After that, the guy said that the main character was still a novice hunter, so he asked permission to tell him more about Overlike. He began to say that usually monsters had many mutations, including in appearance. However, if you look at Overlike, he looked like an ordinary wolf. It turned out that all of his peculiarities were hidden in his internal structure and organs. Overlike's muscles were developed to an impossible level. They were so strong that it was almost impossible to pierce them with a spear or arrow. Also, when walking, Overlike trampled the ground beneath him because he was very powerful. Having received all this information, the main character had a logical question. Namely, he was interested in how, in this case, the Panted team was going to hunt this wolf. Suddenly Panted, who had finished peering into the darkness, said that it was all worth it. After that, the guy said that if Overlike was once the leader of the pack, now he lived alone underground, which means that he was expelled. Panted believed that if his assumption was correct, the wolf's wound on his leg was so deep that he lost his maneuverability. The guy with glasses continued to say that in the world of monsters, everything worked according to the laws of the jungle, and perhaps when Overlike was injured, he lost his strength and became a burden to the pack. That's why Panted believed that they could win if Overlike weakened. In addition, the guy did not forget that now there was a healer, Kim Sung-ju, on his team, so the chances of success increased. However, the captain asked his comrades not to lose their vigilance, and even if Overlike was wounded, he was still the boss of this dungeon. Suddenly, Panted turned to one of the team members and asked if the bomb was ready yet. The guy who was doing something to the side of the group confirmed this. Hearing this, the team leader told his comrades that as soon as they heard the sound of the explosion of the time control device, they should jump and attack the wolf. At this time, the fairy noticed that the main character was nervous and asked him not to worry because he would not be alone. Besides, Hot Chocolate was sure that those who were called always had to finish what they started. These words raised Kim Sung-jun's enthusiasm, and why did he start smiling and say that the fairy had the gift of the tongue? Getting to his feet, the main character decided to see what was special about that wolf if he was called a boss. Kim Sung-ju smiled as he placed the mace on his shoulder and prepared to fight Overlike. At this time, in the depths of the cave, in the absolute silence, a huge wolf was sleeping carefree. The large scar on the monster's eye indicated that he was not the boss of this dungeon for nothing. Suddenly, a loud explosion sounded in the dungeon, raising clouds of dust. A bright fire completely drove away the darkness for a moment. The Panted team members waited for the smoke to clear and began to peer into the distance, trying to figure out what was hiding in the darkness. One of the guys was surprised that this cave was quite spacious and thought that Overlike had found a great place for a lair. Panted, who was very tense, and without losing concentration for a moment, told his comrade to stop chatting because the owner of this cave had already come out to greet them personally. A pair of glowing eyes that belonged to a dangerous monster looked at the people from the darkness. Seeing our heroes, Overlike began to look at them angrily and growl loudly, demonstrating that he was not happy to see strangers in his dungeon. The wolf's twisted growl echoed throughout the cave, but the monster itself remained motionless in place, not taking its eyes off the people. The guy who held the shield in his hand assumed that Overlike was not going to enter the battle first. Panted was surprised that enemies broke into the wolf's house, but he did not attack. Looking at the wound on Overlike's leg, the guy decided that it was much more serious than he had previously thought. Then Panted decided that he would go first because even though the wolf was no longer as strong as before, he was not the leader of the pack for nothing. The team leader also asked his comrades not to lose their vigilance and follow him, after which he ordered them to attack the enemy. Our heroes immediately and fearlessly rushed forward to do what they had come all this difficult way for. While the battle with the huge wolf was going on, Kim Sung-ju tried to heal the wounds of his comrades who had already suffered as quickly as possible. After another serious healing, the main character asked his comrade to be more careful. Very soon, the next victim needed help. Kim Sung-ju never refused anyone and diligently did his job. While healing the wound, the guy thought that she had problems because more and more wounded people appeared, and since they could not be absent for a long time during the battle, the duration of treatment had to be shortened. Suddenly, the main character thought that he would be able to use the healing light as an IV drip, because before he had been able to use it as a detoxifier. To begin with, Kim Sung-ju decided to try to apply this skill only slightly and see if he could continue the drip so that it would not be interrupted and would flow continuously. Unexpected members of the Pantheon team felt a surge of strength. They did not understand what was happening but assumed that the main character was involved. At that moment, the guy received a system notification that the level of his healing touch skill had been increased, and now he could heal allies at a distance, albeit more slowly. One of the guys was surprised that he was now in the midst of a battle, but Kim Seong-ju could still heal everyone. People looked at the main character with admiration, which gave him divine powers. The guy glowed brightly and surprised his comrades even more. Kim Seong-ju was very pleased with himself and believed that this was the ability of a true healer. Panted when he realized that all his comrades had already recovered, suggested moving on to the next stage and not wasting time in order to quickly finish with Overlike. Then the commander gave the command to attack the monster, after which everyone immediately rushed into battle in a coordinated manner. At this time, the fairy turned to the main character and said that he had perfectly understood the mechanism of the divine power. The guy was surprised by this and asked if it hadn't been like this from the very beginning. Hot Chocolate replied that it would be nice, but it was not easy to achieve success right away. Kim Seong-ju thought that he would succeed because he was now an angel. The guy continued to say that it was quite easy, but suddenly he felt a strange feeling that immediately interrupted him from his thoughts. This feeling indicated an approaching danger because Overlike ignored the members of the Pantheon team and aimed his gaze at the main character. The monster seemed to understand that if he couldn't defeat Kim Seong-ju, he wouldn't be able to defeat everyone else. Notice the angry look of the fierce wolf on you. The main character began to get nervous and think that he had serious problems. The next moment, Overlike jumped high into the air to get past the attacking Pantheon team members and get closer to the angel who was standing behind him. Panted loudly warned his comrades to be careful as Overlike intended to attack their rear. Kim Seong-ju held the mace in his hands and thought about when the wolf had managed to aim at him, and now believed that with his endurance, he wouldn't even be able to escape. Opening his mouth and baring his sharp teeth, Overlike was getting closer and closer to the main character, who was thinking that now he had no other choice but to take the enemy's blow. At that moment, time seemed to slow down for the guy. He unconsciously activated the first-level combat sense skill and then swung his mace. This did not frighten the ferocious beast at all, and it continued to approach Kim Seong-ju without fear in order to attack him. It seemed that Kim Seong-ju froze in fear and could not pull himself together, but in the meantime, the monster was already very close. Suddenly, the main character realized that the very moment had come when he had to attack his opponent. The next moment, Kim Seong-ju hit the ferocious wolf on the head with his mace with all his might, which surprised himself. Panted and his comrades were shocked to see this, and for a while they hurried, not believing that the healer had managed to attack the dangerous monster. After the strong blow, the wolf immediately retreated back to recover. Meanwhile, Kim Seong-ju was still on the alert because he understood that this fight was not over. The surprised protagonist looked at his hand and did not understand what it was now, because his body seemed to be moving on its own. The guy thought that this meant that he had every chance to defeat the ferocious monster. These thoughts gave Kim Seong-ju strength, which made him tightly squeeze the mace in his hand. Overlike soon recovered and again headed towards the main character in order to take revenge on him for the recent attack. Flashing his bright bloodthirsty eyes, the wolf growled fiercely, scattering saliva to the sides. Now this did not frighten the main character at all. Waving his finger, the guy with a smile told his opponent to attack here, calling the monster a puppy. Overlike couldn't stand such humiliation and immediately rushed at Kim Seong-ju with his mouth wide open. The main character deftly dodged the monster and thought that if he wanted, he could attack as he needed. Kim Seong-ju chose the right moment and with great passion hit Overlike on the head again. This blow stopped the ferocious wolf, who needed some time to recover but still continued to stand on his feet. The main character was unhappy that he did not cause any damage to the monster at all. The fairy noticed that the wolf looked as if the guy had ruined his mood with his attack. Very soon, Overlike fully recovered and again headed towards the main character. We need to attack him. This time, the rest of the Panted team decided not to stand idle and started shooting at the cartoon with bows, but unfortunately without success. After this, the hunters rushed into battle, fulfilling the order of their commander, who said that they all needed to protect the healer. At this time, one of the guys turned to the main character, who was still fully focused on the battle, and asked if he was wounded. The guy then said that the main character was cool and held up well against the ferocious monster, but now he could leave him to the Pantheon team. This option did not suit Kim Seong-ju at all, so he left the guy who had not noticed anything yet and ran back into the battle. Running away and swinging his mace, The main character said that standing aside was not his style. The guy tried to explain that it was dangerous for a healer to interfere in the fight, but Kim Seong did not listen to him. Soon, the protagonist, with great enthusiasm, carried out a whole series of attacks that caused significant damage to Overlike. The ferocious wolf was no match for the agile and ancestral Kim Sung-jun, so he only took blows to the head with a mace. The guy from the Pantheon team who tried to dissuade the main character from fighting the monster was shocked after what he saw and could not say anything. Kim Seong-ju felt incredible pleasure from the battle and believed that this was his style. The fairy admired her master. The same bewildered guy who watched the main characters fight thought that their healer was truly crazy. After some time, the battle was over. Standing over Overlike's lifeless body, Panted said that he looked good for a monster. His comrades surrounded the defeated enemy and said that they would like to have such a puppy. At this time, the main character stood aside and recovered his strength after a difficult battle. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju was surprised and asked if it was possible to tame wild monsters in this world. The fairy replied that to tell the truth, it was almost impossible to tame them. The main character regretted this because he would like to ride such a wolf. The fairy, when she imagined this picture, was delighted by it. Suddenly, Hot Chocolate said that it was a great idea and decided that he would become a wolf. Kim Sung-ju was surprised by this and did not understand how the fairy was going to do this. The next moment, she flew high above the fallen Overlike and began to concentrate, emitting a bright light. Energy enveloped Hot Chocolate, and wolfishly we leave an invisible connection between them. All this was accompanied by the glow of hundreds of small sparks. After this, the energy began to take the form of a wolf, due to which the fairy acquired sharp ears. At the same time, a wolf's tail appeared on Hot Chocolate's back. Soon, Hot Chocolate had completely transformed into a friendly wolf that was indistinguishable from the real thing. Kim Sung-ju was very amazed and thought it was very cool. The guy immediately reached out his hands to pet the animal. Then the main character asked if the fairy could fight in such a form. She replied that it was impossible because she could not reproduce the entire appearance completely. Then the guy asked if Hot Chocolate could at least ride him on his back, and he received a negative answer because he was heavy. Very soon, the fairy changed her appearance and returned to her normal state. An annoyed Kim Sung-ju was surprised that it all happened so quickly. Hot Chocolate justified himself by saying that if he practiced, he would succeed. Suddenly, someone turned to the main character and threw a small bag into his hands. It was Panted who said that this bag contained Kim Sung-jun's share and added that they all made good money today. After that, the guy said that his team was returning to the city, after which he asked where the main character was going to go. The guy answered that he would go to Juven City. Panted thought about it and assumed that it would not be easy for the main character to get there. Kim Sung-ju reminded the team captain of what had happened just recently and said that no matter how difficult it was, he would still cope. Soon our heroes got out of the dungeon and finally rested in the fresh forest air warmed by the warm and bright rays of the sun. After wandering through the forest for some time, they reached a place where their paths diverged. Panted said goodbye and extended his hand to Kim Sung-jun, asking him to be careful. Having shaken the team captain's hand, the main character wished the same to his new acquaintances. The main character left the hunters and went on his way. For some time, the members of the Panted team watched him and waved their hands after him, looking for the last time at the people who had become his comrades in this small preference. Kim Song thought that it was a pity for him to part with them like this, but there was nothing to do, and, adjusting his hat, the guy turned to the fairy, saying that they needed to get to the cities before sunset. After this, the main character immediately set off on his journey because the road to Yuvan City was not close. The big city greeted travelers and local residents with a huge stone chapel that was visible from all streets of the city. Out of helplessness, the exhausted Chile leaned against the wall so as not to fall and said that he could not live by working constantly. Looking around as if he was afraid of meeting someone, the guy decided that today he definitely needed to rest, because when you work so hard it was important to be able to relax. Suddenly, a woman appeared behind the master and ordered him to stop. This frightened Chile. Secretary Saul grabbed her boss tightly by the shoulder and asked where he was going. Chile was afraid to tell her the truth. The girl continued to say that she usually helped the boss, but today she would not do it. Then she said that an important guest had come to see Chile, so he should go to him quickly. Hearing this, the guy was very surprised, and after thinking for a while, he asked the secretary who had come to see him. In the large hall, there were several men in uniform. The guest said that he knew about Chile's constant employment, but he could not even imagine how difficult it was to meet him. The man named Hokwam, who was the leader of the Cloud Knights, smiled widely and greeted Chile, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The guy replied that he simply didn't want to date a man. Hokum laughed at this and said that it lifted his spirits. Chili looked intently at one of the soldiers and thought that even though he met him for the first time, everything was clear to him at first glance. The guy looked at the black-haired and blue-eyed assistant of the leader of the Cloud Knights and could believe that he would be able to see the wolf Erklium Talidi. The Urulium dimension was known for the fact that different monsters ate each other there, and people were just their food. Those summoned from this dimension were well known for their superpowers. Chili continued to look at his guest's assistant and think that among these summoned there was one unusual strong guy. The boy still couldn't understand why a man like Erklium Telid joined the Knights. Hokum assumed that Master Chili already knew why he had come to him. After that, the leader of the order gave a sign, and his subordinate brought out a large suitcase. The man continued to say that the adventurer was able to discover something, but it was difficult for the order to do it themselves. Then Hokum said that Chili was a completely different person and would not carry out orders for free. After this, the subordinates opened the suitcase in which there were many gold coins. It seemed that this did not surprise the guy at all, and he soon said that the information he had was not that valuable. After that, Chili put on the table a folder with documents for which his guest came to him. Erklium Telid took this folder and did not carefully look through all the contents. After that, Hokum got up from the couch and thanked the guy for his help with a smile, saying that they would see each other soon. Chili replied that he didn't want that because he was tired of the man. Hokum just laughed at that. After some time, the guy looked out the window and watched as his guest, accompanied by knights, left his place of work. Chili was surprised and did not understand why the leader of the order brought so many people with him for such an occasion. Still, the guy was glad that it was all over and thought that he needed to escape quickly before another case arose. Opening the door to leave the office, Chili saw Erklium Talidi in front of him and assumed that he would die as soon as he closed his eyes. The unexpected meeting seemed to strike the guy as if he was struck by lightning, and he timidly asked why the assistant to the head of the order was here now. Walking inside Erklium's office, Telid said that he had heard that Chili had a lot of information and knew a lot. The guy replied that maybe it was like that, but maybe not. Then the assistant to the head of the order decided to ask the master the questions that interested him. The guy suddenly asked if Chili knew anything about the Bible. Erklium Telid explained that he was looking for her because he needed her. Suddenly, Erklium Telid asked Chili if she knew where he could find a Bible. This question really surprised the guy. After thinking for a bit, he asked his guest why he needed her. Telid clenched his fist tightly, which indicated that the guy did not want to talk about it again, but he still answered that the reason was the brand of black water. What he heard amazed Master Chili so much that he couldn't even say a word, and only continued to listen to what the assistant to the head of the order would tell him. Erklium Telid explained that he wanted to remove this curse from someone close to him. At this time, the main character walked confidently through the city. Kim Sung-ju looked at the main attraction of the city and was glad that he finally got there. The guy did not notice that passers-by were looking at him strangely. The thing was that the long and grueling journey had affected his appearance and the condition of his clothes, but Kim Sung-ju didn't notice it at all. Having entered one of the inns, the main character demanded that he be given a room. The disgruntled guy who worked here refused the visitor, saying that they did not accept beggars. Kim Sun explained that in the permanent courtyard opposite, he was told to come here, but the guy continued to insist on his own and say that they would not accept a tramp even if he had money. The owner of the inn came to all this noise and asked what had happened. The guy explained that the beggar wanted to spend the night in their establishment because he was sent here from a neighboring inn. The manager thought for a moment and asked if the main character could pay for the room. The guy was very pleased that the man did not drive the tramp away, but began to talk to him. However, the man took Kim Sung-jun's side and said that their guest had no other place to stay, and moreover, he had money. The protagonist was pleased with his victory in this dispute and immediately demonstrated this to the innkeeper. The guy was very angry with his client, but he couldn't do anything about it. After a while, the guy calmed down and returned to his usual duties, which consisted of maintaining cleanliness in the establishment. The worker was unhappy that only beggars gathered in their tavern, and therefore the establishment was in terrible condition, and because of this, the guy had a lot of trouble. These reflections were interrupted when one of the visitors unexpectedly approached the worker. The guy turned to the guest and politely, but without enthusiasm, asked what he needed. Suddenly he saw in front of him the main character, who had just returned from the shower. Kim Sung-ju began to sit down at the table to place an order. After that, he asked the worker with whom he had had an argument to bring him some food. The guy was surprised and did not believe that this beggar was this girl. Because of this worker, it was as if lightning had struck him. He remembered all the bad things she had said to the educator and was afraid of the consequences. The main character said that where he used to live, the guy would have been immediately fired for his behavior, after which he again asked to bring food. The worker immediately ran off to the kitchen. Kim Sung-ju continued to say that the guy was lucky that there was no review system here. Suddenly, the main character heard how the man behind the next table loudly banged mugs and was indignant at the fact that they met Cloud Knights. The men continued to discuss that the devils were of course bad, but they provided a livelihood for the hunters. But now they were all being killed. Kim Seon-ju also heard that the order's senior assistant, who was a crazy demon slayer named Telid, left the order. The hunters continued to scold the Order of Knights for taking away their bread. Meanwhile, the main character was brought his food. The employee of the establishment was in no hurry to leave and seemed to want to say something. Kim Sung-ju looked at the guy with displeasure and patiently waited for what he would say to him. Surely the guy wanted to compliment the main character on his appearance, which was very different from what the workers had in their heads and in reality. However, the worker was very embarrassed to say this, and therefore wished him a pleasant appetite and quickly ran away. The main character did not understand what the reason was and considered this guy to be somehow strange. After this, Kim Sung-ju heard noise from the men at the next table again and decided to return to eavesdropping on their conversation. This time the men discussed the taste of barley beer and that they wanted fried potatoes. The protagonist was unhappy and blamed everything on the useless worker who distracted him. Also, Kim Sung-ju was not happy when he saw that Fairy was eating his food, but the guy no longer had the strength to swear. Meanwhile, it was already late evening, and so the main character decided to go to bed. The next day came. A loud noise was heard in the room. Someone wanted to enter the office, but they wouldn't let him in. Chile was sleeping in his chair, and through his sleep, he heard his subordinates telling the guest that he had no right to meet with the director whenever he wanted. The guest insisted on his own and loudly said that he had an invitation. All this noise woke up Master Chile. Suddenly, Kim Seong-ju burst into the office, bypassing all obstacles, kicking down the door and telling the guy that he was there. Chile was glad to see the main character and said that he looked great. The guy got up from the table and offered his guest coffee or tea, but Kim Sung-ju asked if he had any chili beer, and the main character responded by looking in the refrigerator. As it turned out, it was there, and so Kim Sung-ju immediately took it. After trying the alcoholic drink, the main character's mood noticeably improved. Chile was surprised that the guy came to him so quickly and said that he promised him at the hospital. Kim Seon-ju knew this because the nurse told him. The guy continued to say that while he was waiting for the main character, he heard stories about the healer from several of the summoned ones, and they were interesting. Chile knew that thanks to the healer, the raid in the dungeon was successful and all the summoned ones repeated this. Kim Sung-ju proudly confirmed his participation and said that he was very good on this raid. Chile was glad to hear this. The next moment, Chile began to get indignant because the problem was that the main character's level was still low for raids and he could get hurt. Then Chile suggested that Kim Sung-jun sign a contract with him so that he would give him a worthy task. Thanks to this, the guy could quickly increase his level and his value as a healer. For a while, Kim Seong-ju silently listened to everything Master Chile told him without asking any questions. From what he heard, the main character had the feeling that he was being used, but still, although with displeasure, he agreed to sign the contract. Suddenly, the main character said that he as a guy had a request. To this, Chile looked for a suitable form for the contract, saying that he would do everything in his power. The next moment, Kim Sung-ju declared that he wanted to find the Bible. Chile was immediately taken aback by what he heard. Quickly coming to his senses, the guy looked at the main character and asked again what he meant. Kim Sung-ju assumed that Chile did not know the Bible. Suddenly, the guy started smiling broadly and assuring the main character that he knew about it. After that, he thought that few people knew about the Bible in Shirley Flichen, but two important figures were looking for it at once. Comparing these facts, Chile wondered if there was some kind of connection between Erklium Telid and Kim Sung-jun. While the main character signed the contract, Chile continued to think that he should have closely followed these two figures. Handing the signed contract to the guy, Kim Sung-ju was happy that Chile would help him find the Bible. The guy smiles good-naturedly and says that he will try to help the main character with this matter. After this, Master Chile and Kim Sung-ju shook hands, thus sealing their deal. After meeting with Master Chile, the protagonist returned to the inn where he was staying. The guy threw a heavy bag of money on the table, which greatly surprised the establishment's employee. Kim Sung-ju explained that he needed to stay longer, so he would be staying here for a long time, about a month. The main character hoped that this time everything would work out, and he would not have a conflict with the employee of the establishment. The guy was surprised by this and believed that it really was an angel. He hoped that even though the manner of speech was rude, the main character's soul had to be kind. Suddenly, the guy turned to the inn worker again and rudely asked why he was digging around instead of bringing him breakfast. The main character also said that if the guy wanted to earn money, he had to work for every coin. The worker also realized that his hopes were pointless. After some time, Kim Seon-ju returned to the building where Master Chili worked. The guy started telling the main character that he had an idea of where the Bible might be now. But now, he couldn't provide any precise information about it. Kim Seong-ju was surprised by this and asked what was the matter. Master Chili sighed heavily and explained that with the level that the main character had, he would not be able to get anywhere near those surroundings. The guy also said that the main character was the only healer in this world and therefore he could not allow him to die. After this, Chili asked the surprised Kim Seong-jun to imagine how unprofitable this would be for both him and the company. Sitting on the sofa, the guy advised the main character to first slowly raise his level. Master Chili also said that he knew several people who could help the guy with this and promised to introduce them a little later. The guy explained with a sly smile that for them, the main character was a very valuable human resource, so they would have to actively push him to the top. Kim Seong-ju didn't take these words with any enthusiasm at all and looked at Master Chili in silence for a while. Still, he asked why it was necessary. Chili did not understand what the main character meant. Then the guy asked why the master wanted to introduce him to the teachers and why he himself couldn't help him, since Chili had just said that he would push him up himself. Hearing this, Chili began to laugh and say that he would not be able to personally train the main character. Kim Seong-ju looked at the guy and didn't understand whether he would help him or not. The guy remembered all this when he was sitting at the table in the tavern. He did not understand from whom and what he would have to learn because he was the only healer in Shirley Fleiken. Suddenly, a visitor who had just entered the establishment approached the main character and greeted him. It was a girl named Anna Piper who was hired by Master Chili to be a teacher for Kim Seong-jun. She showed a baptismal certificate and a qualification certificate for religious activity and said that she had studied at a medical university for 6 months. Kim Seong-ju looked through all these documents, but they did not impress him at all. The guy did not understand why the girl showed them to him at all. After this, the main character asked with displeasure whether the girl had been playing only as a healer all this time, to which he received a positive answer. Kim Seong-ju was unpleasantly shocked and did not believe that this was the teacher who would help him. Unexpectedly, Anna Piper stated that her resume was not written for fun. The girl continued to say that if the main character had ever played an RPG on Earth, he knew that the training of healers and combat characters was fundamentally different. The girl believed that although the system in this world was a little different, it was very similar to the game one. The next moment, Anna Piper confidently stated that her experience would be very useful for Kim Seong-jun. Hearing these words and seeing the girl's enthusiasm, the main character thought that she was speaking quite seriously and really wanted to help him. Kim Seong-jun's training began the very next day and took place in the same tavern. One of the visitors thanked the healer for his help. Anna replied that if he had any more pain, he should come again. At this time, the dissatisfied guy sat silently to the side. Despite the girl's enthusiasm, Kim Seong-ju did not understand why this was necessary and how it could help him. The whole point was that Anna Piper offered everyone who wanted a miracle cure absolutely free of charge. The main character was supposed to treat people. The girl said that she didn't see any problem with this, especially since the management of the establishment allowed her to do this. After that, she called the next visitor. Kim Seong-ju explained that this was not what he meant and asked what all this had to do with training. Then Anna reminded the guy of his own words that the more people he healed, the more experience points he would receive, and by receiving recognition from people, his divine power would grow. So, based on these instructions, the girl simply created an effective teaching system. The guy was shocked that his teacher was going to open a free clinic here without even asking him. Anna Piper calmed the main character down by saying that it was necessary in order to raise the level. In turn, the girl promised to do everything in her power to teach Kim Seon-ju. Hearing this, the guy thought about the words of his teacher and even began to think that all this was not so meaningless. Unexpectedly, Anna Piper asked the main character to come to his senses because the next patient was already waiting for him. While the visitor was telling us about his complaints about our health, Kim Seong-ju thought that he didn't want to admit it, but the teacher's method really worked. For a long time now, the main character has been using his healing skills to cure the ailments of people in need. Thanks to this, The guy received system notifications that he was receiving experience points for treating patients and gained many followers because people trusted him. In addition to experience points and leveling up, Kim Seong-ju also received sincere gratitude from the people he helped. This raised the mood of the main character, so he began to think that there could not be a better way to train. This training continued all day, and even when the sun began to set over the horizon, it was still not over. Suddenly, a worried visitor burst into the office where Kim Seong-ju worked and addressed Mr. Healer. This suddenness slightly frightened the main character. Since there was already one visitor in the office, Anna Piper demanded that the man keep the line. The man who burst into the office asked for forgiveness and said that it was urgent. He was holding a man in his arms who was unconscious and bleeding. This sight suddenly made Kim Seong-jun feel unwell, causing him to clutch his heart. Seeing the wounded man there, Anna Piper was shocked and realized that there was no time to waste. The girl turned to the main character and said that he was obliged to save him. Kim Seong-ju replied that he himself knew this well. After that, the guy thought that even if his teacher hadn't said this, it would still have been hard for him to look at a person dying. Little by little, Kim Seong-ju came to his senses and turned to Anna Piper to give her his instructions. Rolling up his sleeves and getting ready for the suddenly appeared work, the main character asked the girl to take down the extract that was hanging at the entrance to the office. Kim Seong-ju explained with a serious expression that this was the last patient he would see today. The man who brought the victim to Kim Seong-jun began to tell him that it was about half a day's walk from Yuan City to the destination to the east. There was one dungeon that seemed completely ordinary to the hunter and had nothing special about it. The man started to get nervous when she told him that in this dungeon, he and his friend had a problem with the final boss. The monster's entire body was covered in blades and my eyes glowed with rage. The boss himself turned out to be incredibly dangerous. Therefore, at the end of the hunt, the adventurers escaped from the dungeon without killing the monster. While saving his comrades from being pursued by a dangerous monster, Mr. Rakender was seriously injured. The man who brought the victim was in despair and blamed himself for everything that happened. He believed that if he had not been so arrogant, this would not have happened. Let's cheer the man up. Anna Piper turned to him and put her hand on his shoulder. Smiling kindly, the girl said that if you believe the rumors, then Mr. Rakender really was a good man. At this time, Kim Seong-ju, not distracted by conversations, used his skills to try to save the man. Along with this, the main character wonders if this was really his punishment for everything, since in his past life he showed no interest if someone got into an accident or died. Because of this, the boy now felt disgusted with his past self. Kim Seong-ju continued to heal the wounded man, but could not understand why he had such feelings towards himself. The protagonist believed that in some sense it was like imprisonment. It was as if someone was deliberately forcing him to have such feelings towards himself. The fairy knew what thoughts were troubling the guy, and therefore tried to explain what was happening to him now. She explained that the guy's personality merged with the body of the angel. Kim Seong-ju still did not understand what this meant and needed details. Then Hot Chocolate said that when the guy was reborn as Shirley Fliction, he was given a new look. This appearance contained the moral values that were inherent in angels. The main character became indignant because the divine dragon took his normal body and for some reason changed it to an angelic one. Hot Chocolate was about to tell what the divine dragon's true motive was, but suddenly stopped. He will be given information in which Kim Seong-ju was crying bitterly and the lifeless body of a man was lying next to him. Still, the fairy only assumed that the divine dragon had some reason for this. The treatment of the seriously injured man lasted until the morning. All this time, the main character fought for Rakender's life. Still, he managed to save the dying life, and now the man was out of danger. Kim Seong-jun's bloody hands indicate that it was not so easy to do. The main character stood over the man he had saved, and was surprised that he was able to help him with his own hands. But a lot of divine power was spent on saving the dying man. Hot Chocolate was happy about this and asked how the guy felt. Kim Seong-ju, hearing this question, breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Despite being tired, the main character was glad that the worst was behind him and replied that he felt pretty good. In the end, the treatment was successful. The man who brought his wounded comrade was shocked to the depths of his heart when he saw that everything was okay with him. People said that the hunter Rakender, known for his big soul, miraculously survived that night. The man was glad that his comrade had survived and therefore, without hiding his sincere emotions, he hugged him tightly. Rumors of what happened along with Kim Seong-jun's fame spread around the area incredibly quickly, causing the number of believers to increase significantly along with the effectiveness of the guy's divine power. This gave the main character a lot of experience points in divinity. Kim Seong-ju was very happy about this and did not believe that he became popular. That wasn't all. People started coming from all over the continent who had heard all these rumors. Anna Piper reported again and again that the guy had visitors. But not all of them needed the help of the main character. Many of them were hunters who really asked the angel to join their team. Representatives of medical associations also came to the guy and asked the main character to demonstrate his capabilities. But what Kim Sung-ju didn't expect at all was that people from the church would come to him. The cardinal of the New World Church, whose name was Cottleborn, directly stated that the wings of the protagonist had to be spread in the name of God. The old man continued to say that if the boy really wanted to save the world, then he should have joined them. Kim Seon-ju was very surprised by this. Anna Piper was also shocked by the appearance of this visitor and his offer. The girl felt danger from him. She immediately shut the main character's mouth so that he would not give his premature answer. In fact, looking at this man, the main character realized that he did not have any divine power, and he was only talking nonsense. Therefore, Kim Song was not going to cooperate with him. Anna Piper politely replied that the main character had already signed a contract with their organization. The guy was surprised at how easily the girls managed to sort out the situation. With this unpleasant news, Cardinal Cottleborn returned to the New World Church to report everything to his higher authorities. The elderly man told how his meeting with Kim Sung-jun went, but he could not say anything more about it. The cardinal assumed that the protagonist and his teacher were extremely careful in making their decision, and it was very noticeable. Hearing all this, the girl immediately asked what Kim Seon-ju's answer was to the older man's proposal. This question was asked by a beautiful girl who was a saint of the Church of the New World. Her name was Shalaya. Cardinal Cottleborn seemed to be afraid of disappointing the girl and therefore did not answer right away. But still he did not hide the words of the main character that he would not join them. The old man apologized for not being able to get Kim Sung-ju on their side. At this time, Shalaya was in the main character's photograph, along with which a letter arrived. The girl sighed heavily and said that nothing could be done about it, because they couldn't bring the guy against his will. I continued to look at the photographs of the saint of the Church of the New World, and suddenly asked if the guy really had such an appearance. Cottleborn was surprised by this question, but he still answered positively. The girl then said that they should have kept an eye on Kim Sung-jun, after which she praised the cardinal for his hard work. After this, Shalaya said that the old man could return to other matters. Cottleborn bowed respectfully and left. The saint of the New World Church continued to look at the photograph of the main character and was touched by his appearance. Suddenly, the girl said that she wanted to get Kim Sung-jun for herself. This was heard by a man in armor who was hiding nearby. The formidable knight took these words as an order. His face did not change at all in expression, as if this was not the first time he had to carry out something like this. Meanwhile, work was in full swing at the headquarters in Master Chile's apartment. The guy asked his secretary if she knew anything about the Blackwater brand. The girl added that Telid himself did not have this brand. Chile agreed with this, but remembered that the guy looked extremely worried when he spoke about it. Chile was interested in who this could be connected with. Suddenly, Sol said that the assistant to the head of the order had a younger sister. She also said that this girl had been in the Yuvin City Hospital for 2 years with some serious illness. Hearing this, Chile assumed that this was why the guy was so desperate that he even left the order. Even though everything sounded and looked logical, Master Chile was still worried about something. The guy thought that something was wrong with this situation. Secretary Sol agreed with her boss because she was worried about the same thoughts. Master Chile thought that the Bible was a forgotten relic of the past and did not understand how Telid could know of its existence. The guy continued to think that the assistant to the head of the order did not look like a person who knew how to find information. So Master Chile had only one explanation for how the boy could have learned about the Bible. Chile thought that someone might have told Telid about this ancient artifact. After this, the guy turned to the secretary and said that they needed to slowly find out who was behind this, and to do this, they needed to start with the hospital. Chile thought it was time for them to speed up and introduce Kim Sung-jun to his second teacher. Secretary Sol said that she would pass this order on to Anna. After that, the girl had already set off to carry out the assigned tasks, but suddenly Master Chile stopped her because he remembered something else. The guy asked to tell Anna to be careful, because until the training was completed, it was necessary to do everything to avoid the main character meeting Telid. With a wide grin, Chile explained that it was difficult to predict what the two would do to each other if they collided. Kim Sung-ju stood in place and looked at someone with displeasure. At this time, the voice of a railway worker said that their train was heading to Mount Clareta. Talid looked at the main character with the same displeasure. The voice continued to say that the train was expected to arrive soon, and therefore the passengers should check their tickets. The two stubborn guys looked at each other and could not resolve the conflict that had arisen between them. Kim Sung-ju tried to move forward, bypassing Teled on the left side, but due to a misunderstanding, the former assistant of the Night Order also moved to the left. The same thing happened again when the main character tried to go around the stranger on the right side. This situation made Kim Sung-jun very angry, because he thought that the guy opposite him was doing all this on purpose. Teled was also very unhappy with the situation that had arisen and demanded that the main character step aside. Anna Piper, who was in the same carriage, heard Kim Sung-ju loudly asking the guy not to stand in his way and to step aside. The girl immediately had the feeling that she had already spoken of more than once about the approaching danger. The girl would also intervene in conflict situations and lower the main character's head in order to apologize to Teled, and said that she had not been able to find Kim Sun for a long time. The girl continued to calm the guy down and admire the fact that only a handsome adventurer had entered their carriage. After this, Anna Piper wished Teled a good trip and took the indignant protagonist aside. For some time, the former assistant to the head of the Order of Knights looked in surprise as our heroes walked to the other end of the carriage. Still, the guy turned around and opened the doors and went to look for his seat, which was indicated on the ticket. Anna Piper watched Teled leave, her eyes already aware of Chile's order that the main character and this guy shouldn't have met. The train sped along the railway, passing hills and rocky mountains. When the main character calmed down, the girl handed him some documents. Kim Sung-ju was surprised and asked what it was. Anna Piper said that it was a summons certificate and a herd-level hunter certificate that identified the protagonist and allowed him to hunt monsters. The guy was happy about this because now he could finally buy his own drinks. The girl did not share her student's enthusiasm. After that, Kim Sung-ju asked the girl where they were going on this train. Anna Piper briefly answered that they were going to the second teacher who would continue the boy's education. The main character was surprised that he would no longer work in the underground hospital because he liked to receive income in the form of divine power. Anna Piper explained that the boy's training had been accelerated and suggested that she had nothing more to teach him. Kim Sung-ju accepted this and asked who would be his second teacher. Looking mysteriously out the carriage window and as if with admiration, the girl said that the level of this man was significantly different from her skills. Anna Piper continued saying that this man was considered a real legend among hunters. The main character was surprised by this and could not believe that his second teacher was so cool. After that, the girl asked Kim Seong-jun if he knew that all hunters were divided by rank. The guy answered with confidence that she knew about it. He also knew that the highest of them was the rank of Joker. The main character himself was now at the level of Herd. The girl continued to say that even among these ranks there were exceptions. The exception was the Devil level, although it was an unofficial title. Anna Piper said that there were very few holders of this title, and each of them had completely different abilities, and they were called so for their ability to fight devils. The girl also said that there were rumors that the main character's second teacher did not take anyone as students and now only hunted animals. Kim Seong did not believe that such a person would accept him as a student, but the girl reassured him and said that Director Chile sometimes kept in touch with him. After our heroes arrived at the right place and got off the train, they headed to Mount Clareda, which was one of the 7 mountain peaks. The old man with a long gray beard and mustache who met them rudely asked who allowed them to appear here. It was a retired devil-level hunter named Torch. He continued to rudely demand that our heroes leave his land, otherwise he himself would drive them out of here. Kim Sung-ju and Anna Piper were shocked by such a meeting with the legendary hunter, but still admitted that such an outcome was expected. Still, the girl tried to establish contact and introduced herself, and said that she was pleased to meet the great devil hunter Torch. However, the elderly man continued to insist that he was not receiving guests and asked our heroes to leave. Then Anna Piper decided to take advantage of the last chance to establish a conversation and handed over a sealed letter. The girl explained that Chile asked her to give this letter to the old man. The old man was surprised to hear this name. Let me clarify that it was the guy who was sitting on the office sofa, Kim Seong-ju, who laughed at such an accurate description of Master Chile. However, the main character quickly calmed down when he realized that no one else was laughing. Meanwhile, Anna Piper confirmed the old man's assumption. Hearing this, the elderly man opened the letter and began to silently and carefully read what the director had written in it. After some time, the old man said with displeasure that this child was arrogant, referring to Master Chile. After this, Torch looked at the main character with a stern gaze, as if trying to understand what kind of person he was and whether he was worthy of learning from him. Still, The elderly man clarified whether the boy who came with the girl was the one Chile wrote about in his letter. Anna Piper confirmed this and said that his name was Kim Seong-ju, and he would become the older man's apprentice for a whole year. Soon, Anna Piper headed back to the station, leaving her student with a new teacher. Torch immediately decided to test Kim Sung-jun's basic strength and suggested conducting simple tests. As expected, the results were disastrous. The main character has not developed his physical strength at all since he arrived in the new world. This caused great doubt in the elderly man Kim Seong-ju's mind. He did not understand what his expression meant. The main character's new home for the next year was Mount Clareta, where the great devil hunter lived. Torcha began to really train Kim Sung-jun and even gave him a uniform for training, although the main character did not really like it. Suddenly, the elderly man handed the boy a handful of papers containing a small red stone. Kim Seong-ju took this stone but did not understand why he needed it. The old man said that the main character would see everything himself when he reached one of the 7 peaks of the mountain, which was called Trintim Peak. The boy was surprised by this and suggested that his training consisted of climbing to that peak every day and bringing back a stone. But the old man denied this. Suddenly, Torch pointed to a completely different mountain and said that the main character would climb it every day. The talk was about Gruntim Peak, which was located directly opposite Trintim Peak and was several times higher. After this, the elderly man prepared to leave, leaving a shocked Kim Sung-ju alone with his thoughts. Suddenly he stopped and turned to the main character because he remembered something. The guy was afraid that now he would receive another difficult task. Torchy clarified that the main character had to move and place stones from one mountain to another, and all this in one morning. After that, the old man started looking for something in order to give it to Kim Sung-jun. Suddenly, a loud explosion sounded near the main character and a cloud of dust rose, which frightened the guy. It was a small bag of sand that was so heavy that it pushed down on the ground. The guy had to carry it with him throughout the year while he was training. Kim Sung-ju was shocked by the difficulties he had to face ahead. In order to bring the boy to his senses, Torchy loudly ordered him to move. From the very morning of the next day, the main character began to train his basic strength by putting heavy sandbags on his feet. Considering Kim Sung-jun's physical condition, he started with a relatively easy climb up the mountain. However, the guy was not at all satisfied with the older man's standards. In addition, the teacher told his student that if he wanted to become a monster hunter, he had to eat like a hunter. Torchy explained that now every morning the main character will get edible monsters, 1 per day. The old man continued to say that it didn't matter who it was, because when the guy brought his catch to him, he would tell which monsters were edible and which were not. The old man also said that, among other things, the main character would also cook. Seeing the displeased look of his student, the old man asked if he really thought that he would do this himself. After eating, it was time for Kim Sung-jun to practice with weapons. The main character was trained to use various equipment such as swords, spears, and bows, but first he demonstrated the skills he had. Torchy watched closely as Kim Sung-ju wielded his mace, which had once been able to defeat Overlike. Suddenly, the elderly man ordered the main character to throw away this weapon. This suddenness surprised the guy very much. Kim Seong-ju began to say that it was his little precious shining staff and did not understand why the old man ordered to throw it away. The elderly man explained that the holy power was incompatible with such a weapon, after which he asked if the protagonist knew about this. Besides, Torch said that the guy had too little strength to wield such a mace. Kim Seong-ju was not happy to hear these words, but did not dare to say anything against it. The old man continued to explain that such a weapon was only effective when the owner struck with great force, but the main character, in the old man's opinion, had nothing to do with this. Kim Seong-ju, although very dissatisfied, did not argue with his teacher and asked what he should have used in that case. After some time, our heroes approached a large gate after an elderly man opened it, and the main character saw a huge room that was completely filled with various weapons. Kim Sung-ju was shocked by what he saw. Torchy said that it was his arsenal that he collected when he was a hunter. The main characters examined the weapon and were surprised that even from the outside, it seemed very expensive. The fairy, looking around, was also surprised at how much there was here. The older man said that he allowed the boy to use everything he wore during his training. The old man allowed this because he wanted the main character to try different techniques and create something himself. He asked the guy to find a weapon that would help him to most effectively reveal his strengths. Suddenly, Kim Seong-ju, holding one of the swords in his hands, asked the old man if he would sell it to him. Torche refused, because everything here belonged only to him. The training did not end there. In the evening, the main character studied various sciences. As a summoned person sent to this world, he had to spend time studying them to fill in the gaps in his knowledge about Shirley Fleekin. Suddenly, an elderly man threw one of the books on the table in front of the main character and ordered him to start reading from it. Kim Sung-ju didn't understand why this was necessary because it was a recipe book. Torche was surprised by this question. The next moment, the old man replied that the food the main character was preparing was impossible to eat. Kim Seong-ju was very unhappy and silently told the old man to cook for himself. At this time, in one of the many castles that was located in the middle of a gloomy forest, an unexpected meeting took place. The great devil Trikal told his interlocutor about what had happened to him in recent years and said that he was very lucky because he accidentally met a real angel. The owner of the castle, taking hold of a cup of tea, was very surprised by what he heard. An ancient devil named Delia Ridicule said that she had not heard anything about angels for a long time. Suddenly, the cup that the woman was holding in her hands cracked for some unknown reason, but the owner of the castle did not get tired of worrying about it. Noticing what had happened, the great devil asked if something was bothering Delia Ridicule, to which he received a negative answer. The woman explained that she was simply excited by the thought of seeing an angel for the first time in a long time. After that, she called the maid to come to the table. The woman immediately obediently approached the table and took the broken cup from her mistress. Trikal was surprised by this and asked if there really were people serving in the fortress. To this, the ancient devil began to say that they were not service personnel. The next moment, the woman declared that these people were her followers. The great devil frowned, because much in this world was already incomprehensible to him, and he wanted to find out about everything. Trikal asked his friend why people now called them devils and not akshayas. Hearing this question, Delia Ridicule looked down with regret, as if it was hard for her to remember the past. However, the woman replied that when Akshay named Trin died, their era came to an end. Then the ancient devil reminded Trikala, who had just recently woken up from a long sleep, that 5,000 years had already passed since then. After that, looking at her guest, Delia Ridicule said that much had changed since he fell asleep at the bottom of the lake. The conversation between two old acquaintances who met in a fortress in the middle of a gloomy forest continued. Trikal asked if the ancient devil remembered the Akshaya named Shikrush. Delia Ridicule asked if it was an old friend of the great devil who had been sealed by people for many years. Trikal confirmed this and said that he had recently managed to break the seal. Delia Ridicule seemed glad to hear this and said that she didn't like that a devil like Shikrush had woken up again. Suddenly, the great devil interrupted his interlocutor and said that he had killed his old friend. Trikalu was sorry to tell Delia Ridicule that Shikrush had lost the right to be called a devil because he had gone mad. Trikal continued to say that he destroyed it with his own hands because a devil who lost control of his powers was a disgrace to the entire race. Delia Ridicule didn't seem to be disappointed by this at all and only said that she was sorry. After that, she thought that she had managed to get Shikrush to work with such difficulty, and now he was dead. Meanwhile, the main character's training continued. Suddenly, the guy turned to his teacher and called him over. Kim Sung-ju clarified whether the divine power was the opposite of the torche strike weapon, and it was confirmed. Then the main character asked whether the old man had told him to throw away his shining staff. The old man calmly confirmed this as well. Kim Sung-ju decided to ask another question, but a little later, because now he didn't have the strength for it. Still holding a huge iron sword in his hands, the main character asked what all this meant. It was already the 20th day of training that was supposed to raise a hunter from the guy. Kim Sung-ju continued to say that she knew there was something romantic about giant swords, but shouldn't he have used what suited him? The guy was indignant that he couldn't even lift this sword. The old man responded that he didn't say that the main character needed to use this particular sword. The older man then explained that in order to create the perfect weapon, it was necessary to gain experience using different techniques. The old man was sure that a hunter should be able to use any equipment, unlike a martial artist who sought to reach the pinnacle of mastery of one thing. The elderly man believed that now the main character needed to prepare for any situation. After that, Torch said that if the guy heard him, he should have concentrated and stopped complaining. Kim Sung-ju was unhappy with all this, but did not dare to argue. The main character continued training and put all his efforts into it. He was even able to lift a huge iron sword, but he was not capable of more. Torture was observed by his student and remembered the letter that Chile had written to him. The old man was sure that there was something strange about the boy. During the training, the main character did not waste time, and in any circumstances made efforts and consolidated what he had learned by repetition, so the results should not be long in coming. The old man kept thinking about how he had been intensively training Kim Sung-joon's missing strength and endurance. At the same time, the old man did not understand why the main character could not use the skills he had acquired during training. Suddenly, a thought came to the elderly man's mind that seemed to him the most convincing. Torche suggested that the main character remained the same as before training because this was a feature of his structure due to his race. To check this, the old man bent down to the ground and picked up a small stone. The next moment, the old man threw it hard at Kim Sung-joon, trying to hit his head, but the frightened protagonist managed to dodge in time. After this, the guy began to get indignant and ask what it was, assuming that the teacher wanted to kill him. To this, Torche only replied that now everything was clear to him. The older man then stated that they needed to change their approach to training the main character. The old man didn't know what the exact reason was, but he assumed that Kim Sung-joon's strength had diminished during training. Instead, the main character became more agile. The guy realized that it was useless for him to play sports because of the design features. The old man continued to say that no matter what they did, the guy's muscles would still not grow. That was how his body was designed. So nothing could be changed, no matter how hard they tried. The next moment, Torchi stated that they should have used the protagonist's wings for training. The older man thought that wings were one of the boy Kim Sung-joon's strong points, and this interested him, and he asked how he was supposed to train then. Picking up another stone from the ground, the old man honestly answered that he had no experience in such training. Therefore, the old man could not teach the angel to fly, but this was not a reason to stop training. Torche wanted to force Kim Sung-joon to train until he learned it himself. After that, the old man said that he would throw stones at the guy, and the main character had to dodge using his wings. Kim Sung agreed to try. The next moment, he swung his hand, which held the stone sharply. It seemed that the former hunter used all his strength for this. The teacher's serious attitude and menacing appearance frightened Kim Sung-joon, who did not expect such enthusiasm from the old man. Torch's appearance indicated that a powerful throw was about to occur, and the main character had to be prepared for it, because the slightest mistake could lead to serious consequences. But everything didn't happen as it seemed at first glance. The throw of the elderly man was completely ordinary and not strong, but Kim Sung-joon still couldn't dodge it. The main character grabbed his head in pain and began to ask why the old man threw it like that, assuming that he wanted to kill. Torche replied that the guy was lucky that it was only a stone. Then the elderly man asked if the main character really thought that those who wanted to kill him would limit themselves to just small boulders. Kim Seong-ju did not understand why the old man asked this question and continued to listen to him in surprise and silence. Torche said that in real life everything was much more dangerous because instead of stones there could be knives, spikes, or even arrows and spears. The old man continued to say that there was no guarantee that the main character would be treated with ceremony as teacher Kim Seong-ju was doing now. Although he was dissatisfied, he did not contradict him. After this, Torche again picked up the stone from the ground and said that if the main character heard and understood him, then he should have concentrated. Kim Sung-ju looked at the old man and thought that since this had happened, he should have taken everything seriously at least once. Some time passed, another morning began, and with it another workout, which had already become a routine for the main character. Kim Seong-ju, like every day before, climbed the mountains with heavy sandbags strapped to his feet. As the teacher said, due to the boy's peculiarities, his physical strength did not increase at all, which made him tired just as much as in the first days of training. However, these trainings were important for the preparation of the main character because they cultivated humility and concentration. Having reached the top, Kim Seong-ju threw a small red stone as his teacher had ordered. The stone fell into a pile of similar red stones, which indicated that the boy's training had already lasted for quite a long time. The training of the hunter from Kim Sung-joon had already lasted for more than 3 months. After the first stage of training was completed, the main character, as always, returned to Mount Clareda, where he lived with his teacher away from other people. After arriving home, Kim Sung-ju immediately announced that he had returned. The next moment, a stone flew at the main character at great speed, but fortunately the guy managed to duck down in time. The stone was thrown with such force that many cracks remained on the rock. Kim Sung-ju looked in displeasure at the direction from which the stone had been thrown at him and began to wait for an explanation of what had happened. Having already prepared the next stone, Torch said with satisfaction that now at least something has come of the main character. After this, the old man ordered Kim Seong-jun to pack his things and suggested that they go down the mountain and eat. The guy did not understand why the old man suddenly decided to do this. Looking at the main character, who didn't understand anything, the elderly man suddenly said that his vacation was starting. After some time, our heroes were already gathered and set off on their journey, descending from Mount Clareta. Suddenly, the main character turned to his teacher, who was walking in front of him. The old man asked with displeasure what had happened. It seemed obvious that Kim Seong-ju, who was carrying a huge backpack with various things on his back, wanted to ask the old man something. Unable to bear it, the guy started shouting loudly that just recently, the teacher said that they were on vacation, but he still had to spend energy. Torche covered his ears so as not to hear this noise. After this, the elderly man asked what the main character expected since this was not his vacation. Next, the teacher reminded me that his student had not even worked for a year, so he had no right to rest. These words angered Kim Sung-jun. After some time, our heroes reached the village of Wolfhem, which was located high in the mountains and was famous for its water channel. The streets in this village looked very neat and well kept. They could even be confused with city streets. Streetlights brightly illuminated the local park in the evening at night. This place was completely different from an ordinary village. Seeing all this, the main character was surprised because he thought that it would be a remote village in the mountains. An elderly man explained that there was a canal nearby that attracted people. The old man then said that merchants often came here, and since there was a pleasant atmosphere here, there were many tourists. Thanks to all this, the village was quite rich, which was reflected in the well-kept streets and parks. Kim Seong-ju was amazed by the local beauty, and the old man continued to say that it was a very beautiful village, and looking at it, the heart was purified. After this, the old man gave the main character some time to enjoy the beautiful view of this place. Finally, he said that the guy should have washed himself because he looked like he didn't fit into this village. Kim Song started getting angry and asking the old man's opinion about whose fault it was that he looked like that. Torche ignored his student's indignation and said that in a little while they would arrive at the hotel where the boy could wash himself. On the way to the establishment, passers-by greeted Mr. Torch with smiles on their faces and said that they were glad to see him again. The local children were very happy when they learned that their grandfather, the hunter, had returned to the village. The elderly man was also glad to see everyone and smiled, which was completely unusual for his usual behavior. At this time, the main character, continuing to hold a huge heavy backpack on his back, waited with all his might for his teacher to say hello to everyone. After this, the boy told the old man with surprise that he was popular among the villagers and asked if it was really the same person. After some time, our heroes reached the hotel. It was just in time because it was already evening. Upon entering the establishment, Torche immediately turned to his old friend named Kimtels, who was the owner of this hotel. Suddenly, the elderly man told his friend that he was still as scary as ever. In response, Kimtels called Torche a bastard. Suddenly, the owner of the hotel noticed the main character who came with the old man and asked who it was. The elderly man said with confidence that it was his student. This answer greatly surprised the innkeeper. Kimtels couldn't believe it and asked if Torche had really taken on an apprentice. Torche reluctantly explained that certain circumstances had forced him to do so. Suddenly, Kimtels took the main character by the hands and, taking pity on him, suggested that the boy had a hard time with his teacher. This angered Torche. Torche began to speak loudly so that his friend would not talk nonsense, because he was the one who suffered the most. Kimtels replied that, with the old man's bad character, the poor student must have suffered. Kim Seon-ju watched this quarrel with interest, assuming that at least one person in this village knew the truth about his teacher. Suddenly, the main character heard someone's voice next to him, which explained that these two old men were simply very close. The voice belonged to a hotel employee named Millie, who greeted the guest. The surprised protagonist also greeted the girl. Unexpectedly, she said that she heard that the guy was Torch's student. Millie continued to say that it was considered great, especially for such a young man as Kim Sung-ju. To this, the tired protagonist honestly replied that he did not want to be this old man's student. This answer surprised the girl so much that she didn't even know what to say. Still, the hotel worker asked with the same smile if the main character wanted to wash himself. Meanwhile, night had already fallen, but only now could Kim Sung-ju allow himself to relax. Leaving clean and dry towels on the shore, the main character went into the hot water, which immediately made him feel better. Kim Sung-ju lay in the hot spring water and enjoyed the fact that he could finally rest after a long and hard day. The main character exhaled heavily and began to rejoice that all the stress that had accumulated in him was leaving. Hot Chocolate didn't understand what this meant and asked if the wounds and fatigue weren't supposed to be healed by sacred magic. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju silently looked at Fairy with incomprehension, as if she had said something stupid. Suddenly, the main character asked the fairy if she was a T, which from MBTI meant callous, insensitive, cruel, but she did not understand what it meant. Kim Sung-ju decided to ignore everything else and continue his vacation. The only thing that bothered the boy was that his teacher made him carry a bag of sand even while washing. After some time, the main character, after a good relaxation in the hot water, returned to the hotel. On the way to his room, something caught Kim Sung-jun's attention and surprised him. There was a large box with various products and jars on the floor. The main character did not understand what it was and what it was for. Suddenly, the guy saw Millie, who explained that she had bought everything that Mr. Torchy might need in advance. Hearing this, Kim Sung-ju began to be indignant to himself, thinking about why the girl did this, because in this way, she shortened his vacation. The hotel worker noticed that something was wrong with the guy and asked what happened. The main character replied that everything was fine and, thanking the girl, went to his room. After that, the guy heard the voice of a girl who offered him dinner, so now the main character went down to the first floor where at that time there were many visitors. Seeing the guy, his teacher began to get indignant and asked Kim Sung-ju why he took so long to wash himself, since a whole day had already passed. The old man continued to be indignant, saying that he had been calling the guy for a long time. The main character thought that he had not had a minute of peace, and the elderly man was always dissatisfied with something. Kim Sung-ju replied that since they were on vacation now, they could have washed themselves longer. After that, the guy became indignant that the old man criticized even his washing. Then the main character asked why Torche insisted so much that he come down here. In response to this, the old man asked Kim Sung-jun to say hello to the man who was sitting next to him. This man was a pioneer of the Kolstik River Canal named Tinkor, and according to the older man, he was a very respected man in the village. After some time, our heroes came to visit the house of Tinkor, who was the richest man in Wolfham. The host greeted his guests with a set table on which there were many exquisite dishes and drinks. The man told his dear guests to have as much as they wanted. Kim Sung-ju looked at the delicious dishes with admiration, but Torcha was not at all impressed by the hospitality of his friend. The elderly man frowned and looked sternly at Tin Rock. Suddenly the old man asked what all this was. The man was surprised and did not understand what his guest meant. Torchy, without touching the food, said that there was nothing free in the world, and the man probably did all this for some purpose. After this, the elderly man asked his friend not to delay and get straight to the point. Tinrock replied that he did not expect anything else from Torche, because he was a completely different person. The man began to say that in fact, the old man was right and he really did have one request. Torche and Kim Sung-ju, who had stopped eating out of surprise, looked attentively at the owner of the house and waited for what he would tell them. The elderly man sighed heavily and said that he had not heard the word request for a long time and began to anticipate the appearance of some kind of task. The Kontix waterway was the source of growth for the small mountain village of Wolfham. Before this canal was developed, the Koltix River was nothing more than a habitat for many monsters. Because of this, the village was on the verge of survival. Since there were no mountain or land routes, the then headman of the village of Tinrock decided to drive all the monsters out of the river and build a canal. But the people around him did not share the elder's enthusiasm and said that it was impossible and that it was just madness. People said so until the village elder discovered something in the dungeons near Wolfham. Somehow Tinrock managed to awaken the Shark River, which lived in the underground rivers among the rocks. This shark was the strongest of all the monsters that lived in the river, but fortunately for some reason, it did not attack people. This shark easily fought off all the monsters that approached the river and drove them away. Thanks to this, peace finally came to the river that was the monster's lair. This happened just a month after the shark awakened. Tinrock admitted that it was thanks to the shark that River was able to build the Kontix water channel, which enriched the village. Having listened attentively to this whole story, Torche did not understand something and asked why the village elder had asked to catch this shark if it was so useful. Suddenly, Tinrock's subordinate put a whole mountain of some documents on the table. The elderly man immediately asked what kind of documents these were. The village elder replied that they were a report on the damage caused. Hearing this, the old man assumed that all this damage was caused by that same shark Tinrock, who confirmed this. After this, the man added that all this was done by a shark in just 1 week. Kim Sung-ju was very surprised when he heard this. The elderly man was also surprised that the beast that protected the canal from monsters was now attacking people. After this, Torche suddenly asked why the village elder had asked him to kill this shark. Tinrock did not fully understand this question and could not give an answer. The old man continued to ask why the man didn't go to the Hunter Center or the guild if he really needed to kill this monster. Tinrock was puzzled by this question. For some time he could not find the words to explain everything clearly. Still, the man said that it was a little awkward for him to address the hunters formally. Torche and Kim Seong-ju did not understand what the man meant, and therefore continued to listen to him attentively. The village elder, sighing heavily as he recalled the past, said that in fact it was the hunters who were most against the construction of the canal. The elderly man, who was himself a hunter with many years of experience, thought that this was not surprising because he understood why they were against it. Tinrock asked if Torcha knew about this, but the old man denied it. The elderly man then went on to say that no matter how you look at it, the river shark was essentially a monster, and no one knew when it would start attacking people. The old man continued to say that it was like walking around with a time bomb, and was sure that the hunters knew about it and therefore opposed the construction. Hearing all this, Kim Seon-ju assumed that now that the shark had actually attacked people, turning to the hunters would be equally strong, because the village headman admitted his own mistake. This prospect greatly depressed Tinrock, so he turned to our heroes for help. Suddenly, the elderly man began to say that, even without the shark, the problem that hung over the village would remain unresolved. The old man suggested that as soon as the shark that dominated the river disappeared, other monsters would begin to flock there again. Then the main character thought that if the shark stays here, it will attack people, and if it disappears, other monsters will come. Hot Chocolate thought that this was a difficult situation. It was difficult for the village elder to think soberly about how to resolve this situation, because everything around was the result of his life's work. Tinrock continued to say that no matter what or who says, he did not regret his choice, because he did it not for himself, but for the future of the village. Despite all this, the man said that he did not want the villagers to suffer because of the consequences of his choice. Torche heard all this, frowning, silently looked at the village elder and thought over the situation in detail. It seemed that the old man was about to refuse the man's request. Kim Seong-ju looked at her teacher with incomprehension, not knowing what choice he would make and what he would say about all this. After some time, our heroes returned back to the hotel where they were staying. Kim Seon-ju closed the door behind him so that no one could hear his conversation with the teacher. Suddenly, the boy asked why the old man had taken the village elder's order to eliminate the monster shark. The main character was interested in this question because he remembered that the old man himself said that even if he caught a shark, it would not solve anything. The elderly man confirmed that he really said so. Suddenly, Torche said that he had one way to solve this situation. The old man thought that after they caught the shark, they could perform a special ritual with its body. This will create a barrier with her soul that will protect the channel from monsters for about a year. Kim Seong-ju was surprised to hear this. The protagonist clarified whether this was really just a temporary solution. Kim Seong-ju was against it and understood how it was possible to kill a shark for this. Suddenly, the old man asked his student if he knew why he became a hunter. The main character was discouraged by this question, but after thinking a little, he assumed that the old man just wanted to vent his anger by beating up the monsters. The next moment, Kim Seong-jun felt as if he was struck by lightning from the powerful blow that the old man dealt as punishment for the boy's insolence. After this, Torcha began to deny the main character's assumption and said that he became a hunter in order to protect. The old man wanted to protect peaceful villages, good people, and the lives they created from monsters. Torche continued to say that for this it was necessary to be able to do even what one did not want. These words touched the main character, and therefore he continued to listen to the old man. Then the old man said that if he took on a task, he would do everything possible to complete it. That was a real monster hunter. Besides, the old man believed that it was high time to see how much the main character had progressed as a hunter after all his training. Hearing this, Kim Seong-ju was shocked because he understood that very soon he would have to fight the monster shark. The old man told the student that until today he had hunted ordinary monsters, so this time he should have been more careful, because even experienced hunters often made mistakes and got caught. Kim Seong-ju studied the available data about the shark and asked how it could be killed if you fought it without entering the water. The old man reminded that the main character had learned to throw a spear, so he suggested trying to use this skill. The guy asked if there was a store that sold spears, but the old man didn't know that. After this, Torcha asked the main character to sort things out himself, since he was going to see a friend he hadn't seen for a long time. Kim Seong-ju was unhappy that the old man left him without answers, and thought that an attack was planned in 3 days, and he did not have any prepared material. The fairy said that the man should have relied on his fists and suggested going and killing all the monsters. The disgruntled guy thought that the fairy was again saying whatever was wrong because it didn't concern her. After that, The main character smiled and thought that a spear was the best way to catch fish. Kim Sung-ju thought that he needed to make a harpoon while there was still time. Kim Sung-ju was sitting on the floor sharpening long wooden sticks. Suddenly, Millie came up behind him and asked what the main character was doing. The town boy replied that he did it with a spear. The girl was surprised by this and then thought that it looked more like giant toothpicks. After this, the hotel worker thought that it would be better for the main character not to engage in art. To this, the guy replied that the girl clearly did not know, but at one time he was called the hyper-realist Kumkaso. After some time, Kim Sung-ju finished his work and breathed a sigh of relief. The main character thought that it was enough for him to learn how to throw a javelin, because it required too much preparation. Then the guy decided that it would be better if he trained with a bow instead of these giant swords and shining sticks, because the bow was easier to carry and many hunters used it. After that, the guy put the prepared spears in his backpack and continued to think that the bow was inferior to the spear in terms of striking power, but its convenience was a huge plus. In addition, the main character thought that the spear looked ugly and pathetic, and therefore it was not a hunter's weapon. Suddenly, Torche entered the room and asked if the guy was ready yet. Seeing the main character's backpack, which was filled with wooden sticks, the man asked what kind of trash it was. Kim Song was unhappy that the old man criticized him, but he answered that it was his throwing spears. Torch was surprised by this and asked if the guy wanted to bring a stone and claimed that it was an axe. The protagonist began to assure that his hunting weapon was actually quite durable. Still, the older men said that with such equipment the guy could hunt as he wanted, because it would be his problem and his responsibility if he died. The main character tried to stay calm. Then the old man began to leave the room, telling the guy not to linger. This made Kim Sun even more soaked. He continued to repeat to himself that he should have shown respect to his elder. After this, our heroes left their room and began to descend the stairs to the first floor of the hotel. Millie noticed this and assumed that the guests were already leaving their establishment. But the old man denied this and explained that he was going to the Cultix channel because his order was waiting there. The girl was surprised by this and asked if Mr. Torche no longer took on hunting assignments. The elderly man replied that it was not he who received this task, but his student, and he himself had other things to do. Millie, hearing about this, could not believe that the leader of the hunting party would hunt himself, and thought that the main character looked weak and frail. The old man laughed at this and said that the girl was right, adding that the guy looked like he wouldn't catch the rabbit either. Kim Sung-ju listened to all this silently without showing any displeasure. Torchy saw that the girl was also going somewhere and asked her about it. Millie replied that she also had business in the Cultix channel and suggested that they all go there together. Suddenly, the elderly man began to scold the main character for not helping the girl eat and her things. The guy replied that he was just about to do so. Handing over her bag to the main character, Millie asked if he could handle it, since she could carry it herself. Kim Sung-ju replied that it was a trifle for him. After that, the hotel worker asked, smiling if she could watch how the hunters would do their job on the way to the Cultix canal. The elderly man replied that the girl could do whatever she wanted because he was sure that there would be no danger. After some time, our heroes came to the right place and first admired the beauty of the water channel, thanks to which the village was so rich. Kim Sung-ju looked at the old wooden boat that was prepared especially for him and was perplexed. The main character was afraid that it was about to capsize because it was this boat that he had to use to fight the shark. Torche asked the boy to stop complaining. Then an angry Kim Sung-ju began asking the old man to think about how he would feel on this pathetic boat without an engine, but the old man did not care. The teacher and his student continued to argue while Millie watched with laughter. The girl could not believe that such a small guy could hunt and assumed that he would not be able to catch even a rabbit. Night soon fell. The bright glow of the moon illuminated the center of the water channel well, which played into the hands of the main character. Millie, watching the guy swim further and further away to meet the shark, began to worry about him. The elderly man replied that the girl was worried in vain. After that, he stated that Kim Sung-ju could beat the shark to death and then eat it raw. This surprised the girl. At this time, the main character was sitting in the boat and thinking that the most important thing in hunting was observation. The guy peered into the darkness under the water and thought that he needed to find out where his prey was and where it would run or when it would attack. The main character recalled the words of his teacher who said that even if it seemed that everything was calm now, you couldn't relax because no one knew when and from where they would attack you. The old man also warned that if during a hunt it suddenly turned out that the hunter himself had become the target, it was necessary to maintain concentration for at least 10 hours and always be ready to attack. The main character thought that he was ready for this thanks to training. However, old memories flashed before Kim Sung-joon's eyes, which made the boy doubt. The main character continued to think that he didn't expect much because he hadn't been training for that long. The guy also believed that if the enemy was definitely going to attack from a certain side, then it would be even easier for him. At this time, the elderly man turned to Millie and asked how much the boat on which his student sailed away cost. The girl thought it was not cheap. Hearing this, the old man sighed with regret because he knew that this boat would soon fall apart. Millie didn't understand why the old man was talking like that. Suddenly, our heroes seemed to sense the presence of the one they had been waiting for so long. Kim Seong-ju immediately realized that his opponent had already arrived and was preparing to attack him. The next moment, a huge shark suddenly jumped out of the water and, closing its powerful jaws, completely destroyed the boat. Fortunately, the main character managed to jump up in time and spread his angelic wings. The river shark that protected this water channel did not think of giving up just because its enemy flew into the sky. The monster opened its mouth wide, showing its sharp teeth. Kim Sung-ju thought that his opponent looked fierce. The guy was very surprised and did not believe that he needed to catch this monster. The fairy tried to cheer up the main character by saying that his training was not in vain, because he was able to show the holiness of Kim Seong-ju. These words did not please him at all. After this, the main character took out his spear and considered that now it was the only means of attack. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju remembered the weights tied to his arms and legs and decided to deal with that first. The guy threw them into the water, after which the system immediately reported that he could now attack with greater force because it had increased significantly and also move faster and easier. Feeling an incredible surge of strength and relief, the joyful protagonist believed that he could now fight his opponent. Kim Sung-ju, while studying his interfaces, did not expect that his strength would increase as soon as he removed the weights, so the boy admitted that his teacher's training methods really worked. The main character's divine power continued to grow even though he did nothing, so the guy was very happy about it. After this, Kim Seong-ju took out the spear he had prepared in advance and decided that it was time for him to engage in battle with the shark. While waving his weapon, the guy thought that the results of the training were visible, so he had to finish everything quickly. The wooden spear, endowed with the divine power of the protagonist, quickly rushed into the dark waters of the river, illuminating the space around it with a bright light. The next moment, the spear entered the water, causing strong waves to rise and the spray to spread out to the sides. A happy Kim Sung-ju assumed that he had hit his opponent, but Hot Chocolate said that the shark had disappeared into the river waters. The main character admitted that this monster was smart enough for a shark because he thought that he couldn't be reached in the water. Then the fairy suggested that the guy would have to go down lower. The main character agreed with this, leaving no other choice but to attack close up. At the same time, Kim Sung-ju thought that he did not understand why, in order to defeat the enemy, it was necessary to deliberately leave oneself open. The main character flew closer and closer to the shark, which stuck its head out of the water and opened its mouth wide, showing off its sharp teeth. Kim Seong-ju thought that this was a good moment to attack, and so he swung his spear again. The main character was fully concentrated and was confident that he could finish everything with one precise throw of the spear. The next moment, I flew towards the shark at great speed, cutting through the air and raising large waves around me. Kim Sung-ju was very happy because he thought that this time he had definitely hit his opponent. Although the shark was still alive, it began to dive back under the water, clearly feeling the threat from the main character. For a while, there was absolute night silence all around. Kim Sung-ju did not relax and continued to look at the water surface, on which circles were spreading in all directions. Torche and Millie, who were watching everything from a safe distance, were also in no hurry to rejoice at the victory of the main character and carefully watched what would happen next. Suddenly, a rapid stream burst out from under the water and almost caught Kim Sung-jun. The main character was shocked by this and lost his speech and did not understand what was happening. It turned out that the monster could attack not only like a normal shark, but also open its mouth and release a rapid stream of water at its opponent. Now the main character had to dodge these attacks while thinking about how he could defeat this shark. Kim Sung-ju turned to the old man and Millie and asked if they were okay. The old man said that everything was fine and asked the boy to take care of himself. The main character was unhappy with such a rude answer from his teacher because he only wanted to help. Suddenly, Hot Chocolate warned the boy that his opponent was approaching again. Kim Sung-ju was not prepared for this, but he had to focus on the fight again. The next moment, the monster shark jumped out of the water and, waving its tail, flew high into the air. At the same time, she opened her mouth and splashed out a powerful stream of water, which the main character had to dodge. Kim Sung-ju was shocked more and more by the abilities of this monster, and thought that if this continued, he could die. While the shark was returning to the water, the guy had a break. He thought about the fact that he did not have a normal shield, and his temporary skills could do little to help in this situation. Very soon, the shark's head appeared out of the water again, and its wide-open mouth indicated that the monster was ready to attack again. Kim Sung-ju was very surprised and did not believe that his opponent was already so quickly ready to jump on him again. Once again, taking out a wooden spear, the guy thought that if he loaded up and threw the spear straight into the shark's throat, it might work. But this plan was not destined to be, because the monster's tail suddenly appeared next to Kim Sung-jun's face, which left him dumbfounded. The next moment, the shark attacked the main character hard and then returned to the water. The guy immediately flew away from this unexpected attack. Kim Sung-ju began to get angry because he couldn't do anything because the shark never got tired and continued to attack him again and again. But Hot Chocolate began to deny this, suggesting that the guy had already weakened the monster enough. The protagonist can't believe it, because he thought that the shark still had plenty of strength. Then the fairy drew the guy's attention to the fact that the shark's movements became linear, and it clearly began to panic. Kim Sung-ju was surprised by this. While the main character was fleeing from another attack, Hot Chocolate suggested that perhaps the shark was very hungry. The guy heard this and assumed that it was because of hunger that the shark was so eager to eat him. The fairy didn't know this for sure, so she didn't confirm the main character's guess. Kim Sung-ju then wondered why the shark couldn't eat grass or fish if it was so hungry. To this, the fairy replied that there were no more fish in these waters and assumed that they had all gone for the sharks. Hearing this, Kim Sung-jun was struck by lightning from realization. For a while, there was absolute silence all around. This time was enough for the main character to calmly think everything over. Kim Seon-ju thought that thanks to the cruelty of the river shark, the monsters left these lands, and this allowed the village to prosper. But now that the food has disappeared, the shark has started attacking people, as evidenced by many reports. The main character noticed that this section of the river was dead, and it turned out that this shark was the master of the dead river. When the food ran out, she was forced to go outside her territory to start hunting. Suddenly, the main character felt a strange feeling that had already visited him once, when he treated everyone who wanted it for free. Now the guy had a feeling that he shouldn't have killed this shark, but should have somehow saved it. Suddenly, Kim Sung-ju, forgetting about the battle, began to fly away somewhere. Hot Chocolate asked where the guy was going. To this, the main character replied with a smile that he would only go and complete the task for $1. At this time, Torcha noticed the girl who was staring at the main character and asked why she was so surprised. Millie explained that she was surprised that the guy had wings. The older man asked if the girl had never seen a person with wings, to which she received a negative answer. Hearing this, the old man honestly admitted that he too had never seen such people despite his rich life experience. In the various dimensions and among the many times that Shirley Fleiken has found himself, even the experienced Torchy has never seen anyone look like a winged race resembling angels. The elderly man thought that he himself was surprised every time he saw the main character use these wings. These wings were shining with color and had the ability to heal others, and the abilities that the main character possessed reminded the old man of the legendary angels. Suddenly, Torche was pulled out of his thoughts by the loud voice of Kim Sung-jun, who was in front of him and addressing him. The old man asked what the guy was doing there and suggested that he was refusing the task. The protagonist denied this and explained that he came to check something. After that, the guy asked if the mission was to protect the village from a monster known as a river shark. The elderly man confirmed this, saying that this is exactly what the village elder wanted from them. It seemed that the main character was glad to hear this answer and was prepared to say something to his teacher. The next moment, Kim Sung-ju confidently stated that they were going to kill more of that shark. When Torch heard that the main character was no longer going to kill the shark, he thought for a moment and then completely calmly accepted the guy's desire. Kim Sung-jun couldn't believe his ears at first. It seemed incredible to him that the old man wasn't even going to complain. Torch sighed heavily and said that if the main character had fought with River, he would have shown the growth of his fighting skills. However, the old man was sure that the boy himself knew that using the remains of the shark was a temporary measure. Then the older man suddenly turned to Millie and asked if there was a branch of the hunting union in the Cultix Canal. The girl replied that there was no such alliance here, because until now they had not had to worry about monsters, precisely thanks to the Shark River. Torche wasn't surprised at all when he heard this, because he had already assumed something like this. Kim Sung-joon listened attentively to the old man, still not understanding what idea he was trying to convey. The thing was that usually the right to own the monster's body belonged to the hunter who killed it. To sell it, you had to cooperate with a hunting union, guilds, or hunting managers, but none of that was in the Coltix channel. Suddenly, the old man frowned and asked the main character if he remembered what was written in the hunting contract that he wrote. Kim Sung-joon immediately began to remember this contract, but it was clear that the guy had long forgotten about it. The elderly man immediately began to scold his student and insist that he should have remembered what he signed. The main character had to quickly start looking for the contract. Very soon, Kim Sung-joon found the document and began to study it. One of the main points of this contract was that the right to own the body of the defeated monster belonged to Party A, that is, Tinkor. The guy immediately assumed that this meant that the rights to the monster's body were being transferred. Torchy confirmed this, and then asked her student to think about something. The old man began to say that even if the protagonist underestimated River, he was still a diamond-rank monster, and therefore his body was very valuable. The older man suggested that even if Tinkor called a hunting union from another region to dispose of the body, the union would only help with the sale and preservation of the remains, but would not create a magical field to protect the body. In Torch's opinion, all this meant that no one would know what the main character would actually do with the monster's body. Kim Sung-joon, hearing this, seemed to begin to understand what the older man was getting at. Torche continued to talk about how Tinkor had been using River all this time as a free security guard for the channel to save a lot of money, but now he could no longer control this shark. That is why the old man now believed that the man's goal was to sell the shark's body, despite any agreements. Kim Sung-joon felt that all of this was unforgivable and therefore they had to teach Tinkor a lesson. The main character was very angry that the man almost used them in the dark for his own selfish purposes. After that, the guy turned to Millie and asked if she knew about a place where there was a lot of food that could be fed to the shark. After thinking for a bit, the girl replied that somewhere near the village there should have been a warehouse with provisions for trade. Kim Sung-joon was glad to hear this and casually said that where he lived before, people even paid to feed the fish. After this, the main character, with a wide smile on his face, announced that today they would feed the shark. Some time passed. The clear sun illuminated the house in which Tinker worked for the benefit of the village. The man studied the documents closely, but still could not stop thinking about the shark that threatened the safety of the village. The man thought that Torche had come to their aid just in time, but he thought it was strange that it was the old man's student who had to deal with the shark. In the end, Tinker decided that it was not so important, since he was most interested in the successful fulfillment of the contract and the prospects that this provided. Suddenly, one of the headman's subordinates burst into the office and announced in an agitated voice that they had problems. Tinker immediately asked what happened, assuming that the problem was related to the Shark River and the fact that our heroes had already gone hunting. Surprisingly, the subordinate denied this and explained that this matter concerned the trading warehouse. Sratost was shocked to hear this. At this time, our heroes were still near the underground lake in which the shark lived. Kim Sung-joon slowly threw food into the water, which he took from huge bags. Millie helped him with this, and Torche stood to the side and watched. The joyful main character did not stop for a moment and offered the girl to try feeding the shark, but she wished to abstain. The guy assumed that Millie was just scared, so he said that the monster was eating calmly and now didn't look angry at all. However, when the main character threw food, the shark sometimes jumped up strongly. This is exactly what the girl was afraid of. Millie then thought for a moment and then asked if they wouldn't get caught for stealing food. The main character asked the girl not to worry, because he was not going to tell anyone that it was she who told him about the warehouse. Millie was most worried about something completely different. Just at that moment, Tinker ran out of the darkness and loudly addressed Torcha, asking what was happening here. The elderly man looked at his old acquaintance with displeasure and remembered the saying that as soon as the conversation turned to the tiger, he immediately appeared. An angry Tinker continued to say that there were contractual terms between them, but the old man's apprentice broke into their trading warehouse. While the man was shouting loudly and getting angry, Kim Sung-joon stood calmly to the side as if he was not afraid of any consequences. Torche also remained absolutely calm and advised the man to directly contact the main character in order to ask him about everything. Kim Sung-joon pretended not to understand what the problem was, since the monster was no longer threatening the village. The guy insisted that if they used the village's food warehouse a little, the shark would no longer bother anyone. Tinker, hearing this, began to get noticeably nervous but continued to pretend that he did not understand what the guy was talking about. Kim Sung-joon knew that all this sounded absurd, but in his opinion, the shark just needed to eat and then it would stop attacking. The main character even suggested that this shark could possibly distinguish between people and monsters. Then the boy drew the attention of his old age to the fact that in the river where the shark lived, there were no fish at all, and therefore, in order to survive, it began to attack people. Then Kim Sung-joon asked if the man had used the shark when it was docile, and when he could no longer control it, he decided to kill it. The protagonist found it very convenient that the man used the shark for free to kill monsters, and even after its death, he intended to make a profit. In the end, Kim Sung-joon had uncovered the man's insidious plan and was now ready to dry up his excuse. Tinkor realized the situation he was in, so he looked down and replied that he had nothing to say. Suddenly, Torch's voice was heard, thinking that this was enough. Now it was his turn to ask questions. The elderly man approached Tinkor to find out the answer to just one question. The next moment, the old man asked what the elder was going to do with the body of the shark Rivera. This question worried everyone present.